We are convened as of 4:08 p.m. I'd respectfully ask everyone attending this meeting to mute yourself unless you're recognized to speak. Thank you all for joining us this evening. The meeting recordings, along with the unofficial minutes of the meetings, will be posted as soon as possible on the board's website. During tonight's meeting, we are also providing communication access real-time translation, also known as CART. Anyone who'd like to access this should send an email to the RTD board office at rtd.boardoffice@rtd-denver.com, and a link will be provided. Additionally, the CART transcript can be automatically translated into Spanish for anyone who'd like access to a live transcript of this meeting in Spanish. A live stream of this meeting is also available via RTD's YouTube page. Since we're joined by our colleagues from FRPR and we have no scheduled action items, I'm going to take roll in a slightly different manner, and that is going to ask directors to kindly introduce themselves as I call on you. Please share a quick introduction, including your name, what district you represent, and where that district is within the RTD, and how long you have served on this board. All right, and the first one I'm going to bring up is Director Banker.
Okay, good evening. My name is Karen Bentker. My district is District I, which goes from Longmont down 287 all the way and encompasses Broomfield. So I've got eastern Boulder County, a little bit of Adams County, and then all of Broomfield. This actually technically is my 9th year on the RTD board because I served 8 years back in the 90s. But clearly Northwest Rail has been an important project that I've been working on, and our mayor, Joan Peck. Joan, you're down there. Hi, Joan. We've been working on this for many years, so this is exciting. So welcome to RTD. Looking forward to working with you.
Thank you, Director Banker. I believe Director Busick will be absent tonight, so that turns to Director Chandler.
Good afternoon. My name is Kathleen Chandler, and I represent District F, which is the eastern part of Aurora. So go to 225 and Parker Road and go north, all the way up following 225 to Colfax, over towards E470, down all the way to Quincy, and a little bit past that into the Southlands area. I encompass all of pretty much Aurora, unincorporated Arapahoe County, none of Centennial. And I just started, no Centennial, sorry. I served, this is my first year, so I was elected just last year. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Director Chandler. I'll now call on Director Geisinger.
Hi, my name is Lynn Geisinger. Thanks for coming. I think this is a really important meeting. I think some of our people may be finishing up work and hopefully we'll make it soon. But I represent Boulder and Western Boulder County, so Superior, Louisville, all the way up to the Continental Divide, Nederland, and that area. And I've been on the board for 7 years. Next coming up is my last year. And thanks for coming. We're like Karen, really interested in Front Range Passenger Rail and what that will do, what we can do together.
Thank you very much, Director Geisinger. Director Guchenritter is also absent tonight, as is Director Guzman and Harwick. My understanding is Director Larson will be joining us later, as will Director Nicholson. And I turn this over to Director O'Keefe.
I'm never that quick. Patrick O'Keefe, I've been on the board for I was elected a year ago. My district is Cherry Hills down to Highlands Ranch, in between Santa Fe and 25, except Lone Tree for him and downtown Littleton for Guchenritter. And I'm glad you guys came, and it seems like you're awfully far away. This is like a family that puts an extra leaf in the table for Thanksgiving to keep people apart.
Thank you, Director O'Keefe.
Not that I know anything about that.
Director Pagliari.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Director Brett Pagliari. I represent District M, which is Central Jefferson County, in the cities Lakewood, Edgewater, Golden, Wheat Ridge, and a few other small municipalities. And I've also been on the board for about 12 months now, and excited. I was alive during the Fast Tracks vote, just for the record, but I was not old enough to vote in the Fast Tracks vote, so thank you.
That makes two of us. Director Risha. Director Risha.
Sorry, I was fumbling for the buttons. Hi, my name is Director Rusha. I was alive during the Fast Tracks vote and was old enough to vote for it, but I moved to Colorado 2 months after that vote. And I'm very happy to call Denver home. I was elected to the board in 2022, and I serve as the director for District B. My district covers Park Hill, Central Park, Montbello, Green Valley Ranch, Gateway, as well as DIA, portions of East Colfax, the north part, so the Adams County portion, and some unincorporated areas in Adams County as well. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. And just a kind note, today is my son's birthday, so I may need to exit our study session early. But thank you to our chair for being accommodating and let me dial in remotely while I'm able. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Rusha, and wish your son a happy birthday from all of us. Director Whitmore.
Good afternoon, Troy Whitmore. I represent District K, and I'm completing my 7th year of hopefully 8 years on the board of RTD. I serve the northeast corner of the district, including the communities of Brighton, Commerce City, much of Thornton, and much of unincorporated Adams County that lies within the district. Again, we're all glad you're here, and I had my eyes checked today, and it's a good thing because some of you I'm having a hard time identifying, but that's okay. We appreciate you being here. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Director Whitmore. And I'm Julian Bouquet. I'm board chair for 2025. I'm going on my 5th year as serving on the RTD board. I was originally elected in 2020 and had the privilege of being reelected in 2024. I represent District G, which is Eastern Douglas County, mainly Parker and Lone Tree, and then southeast portions of Arapahoe County is my district. And I can't add on enough weight of what's already been said from my fellow directors of how exciting it is for us all to actually get together and getting this accomplished. Even though we got it towards the end of the year, we're all very happy for you guys to all be here and us to have a conversation. Also joining us tonight is Cindy Arcuri, who earlier today was appointed by the Jefferson County Board of Commissioners to succeed Peggy Catlin as the RTD director from District N. So we will officially swear in Ms. Arcuri to the board at our next meeting, which is going to be January 6th. But I would also like to introduce Ms. Arcuri, congratulate her on her appointment, and ask you to introduce yourself as well.
Push where it says push. Okay. Hi, I'm Cindy Arcuri, and I will be representing District N. Okay, and I didn't prepare for this in advance. All I know is District N is in southwest Jefferson County, where I live, but I'll get more details here before next time, I promise you. I'm excited to be here. Obviously, I have a lot to learn. And I think it's really a privilege to be here. I'm a big fan of public transportation. I've been using RTD since 1983. So I'm definitely a proponent of public transportation. I have a long career in state government. I worked in budget offices and also worked for legislative council staff for a while, in the governor's budget office as well. And right now, I am teaching part-time English to adult immigrants, and so I really enjoy that. And I'm looking so forward to meeting all of you and working hard with you for all the challenges that face RTD at this time. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Arcuri. Thank you for joining us. We're looking forward to you being sworn in during our next meeting. Also present with us is our General Counsel, Melanie Snyder. CEO GM Deborah A. Johnson, as well as our board office staff, including Jack Kroll, who's our executive manager of the board. And with that, I'm going to hand the floor over now to our Front Range Passenger Rail Chair, Chair Nevitt, to facilitate the introductions for your members.
Did I do that right? I did do that right. So, thank you very much for that that introduction, Chair Bouquet, and I think I speak for all of us. We're very excited to be here. The partnership between Front Range Passenger Rail and the Regional Transportation District, we've already embarked on that. Our executive leadership is already hard at work. General Manager Pace with your CEO, Deborah Johnson, and with the governor's office, but we've never gotten together. And so I think it's really important, not just because we're supposed to, but also because it's really important that all of us have relationships with each other. Our constituents are your constituents, after all. So with that, I just want to run through an introduction of the folks from the Front Range Passenger Rail District Board. Beginning with myself, I represent Dr. Cog on the board, together with 3 other appointees from Dr. Cog. I just saw Deborah Mulvey on the screen. Is she plugged in? This is all a system with which I'm
Yes,
not
I
familiar,
am.
of course. Okay, I will come to you. First, GM Pace, you want to introduce yourself?
Sal Pace. I am the new general manager of Front Range Passenger Rail District. I think it's like a month and 9 days or something like that. And previously on the board, before that, and our predecessor commission, and two predecessor commissions before this. So I've been working at this for a couple minutes.
Thank you. And Operations Specialist?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ashika Smith, and I am the operations specialist for the Front Range Passenger Rail District.
Good evening. My name is Joan Peck, and I am the board secretary for the Front Range Passenger Rail District. And I want to thank all of you. It's really nice to put faces with the names that I've heard over the years. I have been working, trying to get the Northwest Corridor to Longmont the whole time I've been on City Council for 9 years. And it's very exciting to see us having a conversation, working on collaboration, and hopefully my residents are extremely happy that we are moving forward. So thank you. It's great to be here.
Hi, Herman Stockinger. I'm CDOT's Deputy Executive Director and CDOT's representative on the Front Range Passenger Rail District Board.
Thank you, Jose Soto. First off, would like to say thank you guys for the opportunity to be here and for hosting us. So we do appreciate that. Once again, my name is Jose Soto. I am a governor appointee on the district in the interest of labor. So thank you.
Thank you. John Mallow, until recently Mayor Pro Tem of Loveland. I've been on Passenger Rail District for 2 years. I'm an appointee of the North Front Range, MPO, and just for the record, I took the bus stand down here, and it was on time, and no issues whatsoever.
Terrific. I'm John Putnam. I'm a member of the district and have been for a couple of years now, and one of the gubernatorial appointees, and also want to say happy birthday to Director Rusha's son.
Good evening. I'm Joshua Lapley. I'm also a gubernatorial appointee as a technical expert. I am a licensed engineer in the state of Colorado and have been doing transportation for a long time, and so that is my role here. Super excited to be here. Definitely synergistic what our two endeavors can do together. So thank you.
Thanks. I think we have 3 members of our party online. Deborah Mulvey.
Hello, I am on my way in. I apologize for being late. I cannot say I took mass transportation today, but I am very happy to be coming in. I know many of you already, so thank you for hosting us, and I'll see you shortly. I'm a council member in Castle Pines, Colorado. I'm the representative from one of the 4 representatives from Denver Regional Council of Governments. I specialize my service in transportation, so this fits very well, and I really focus on the South Metro region.
Thank you, Deborah. And we also have Michael Cook, I think.
Yep. I'm here.
Oh, awesome.
I'm Michael Cook, and excuse me. And I represent the I-70 Coalition on the board, and I am joining you from Maui, or I would be there in person.
We sure
But-
feel for you.
Yeah. But I'm really excited that we're doing this. It's really important. I'm excited to see the progress we make together.
Great. Thank you, Michael. And we also have our general counsel, Brett Butzine. Brett?
Hi, everybody. Brent Putzine. I'm, as Chris said, General Counsel for the Front Range Passenger Rail District. And I'm unfortunately in Los Angeles, otherwise I would be there in person.
Great, thank you. Is there anybody else online? Is Luis Lopez? Are you
Yes.
dialing in? Oh, awesome. Thank you.
Yes, I am. And thank you, Chairman Nevitt, and thank you, Chairman Bouquet. Appreciate it. I am a two-term county commissioner for Los Animas County, who also served on South Central Council of the Governments, who appointed me to this Board of Front Range Passenger Rail. I have been on the board since its inception, and for the last 2 years of Front Range Rail, I've had the honor of being the treasurer of the organization. I thank RTD and having us today, and I've known Mrs. Johnson for a few years now, since she was been on the board for a number of years as well, and look forward to us getting this moving forward. So thank you for having us tonight.
Thank you, Luis. Anybody else? Am I missing anybody else? Okay, Mr. Chair, I'm going to pass it back to you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. We got
Hang on
another.
just 1 second. The person who knows everything is telling me that we also have Nathan Anderson from our board. Is that true? Nathan? Maybe not.
I see Nathan here on the part, is listed as a participant, or as a panelist, so
Okay.
maybe he just can't hear us, so.
Okay, if he comes back, I want to introduce him. He's from the Union Pacific Railroad. Okay, Mr.
Perfect.
Chair?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will put one of our directors on that spot, and that is going to be Director Larson. We are doing introductions right now, Director Larson, so if you wouldn't mind just sharing when you're elected and what district you represent and what areas those are.
Hi, I'm Matt Larson. I'm the director for District E. I was elected, started this past January, so I've been here for almost 1 year. My district covers parts of western Aurora, down through parts of southeast Denver, down through parts of, I guess, eastern Greenwood Village, up to kind of just the northern section of Centennial.
Perfect. Thank you, Director Larson. And again, thank you. We can't thank you guys enough for being here present. This is very exciting. So we're going to go to, this is actually our inaugural meeting of FRPR and the RTD director. So this is very exciting for me to, be able to partially chair this this meeting. Excited to have you guys all here. The meeting as a result of this FRPR and RTD does come the governing legislation that calls for us to have an annual meeting between our two boards. And I do hope tonight's discussion will be insightful and impactful. The partnership between our two boards has the potential to make a profound impact on the transit landscape along the Front Range. And on behalf of RTD, I do extend our sincerest welcome to all of you for taking the time to join this meeting tonight and learn more about the future of transit in our region. I do also want to send a special thanks to our friends from the state of Colorado who are joining us tonight as well for providing crucial updates for us. So I do want to like to say a special thanks to Mo Sullivan, our Assistant Director of Rail for the Colorado Department of Transportation, and Craig Seacrest, Director of the Clean Transit Enterprise, and also Piper Darlington, Director of the Clean Transportation Investment Office. Thank you all for joining us and sharing your expertise with us this evening. A few meeting facilitation notes before I hand things over to Chair Nevitt to say any few words. do want to just graciously say when it comes down to to making sure that everything is as smooth as possible, we do have 5 presentations tonight listed under external entities report. I do ask that we do hold all our questions until after each presenter has finished our update. Once the presenter or presenters have finished, I will ask for any discussion, at which point our FRPR or RTD directors are free to raise their hands. If you are joining by Zoom, please make sure you're raising your virtual hand. With the assistance of my colleagues, First Vice Chair O'Keefe and Second Vice Chair Whitmore, I will maintain a list of speakers. We will do our best to ensure directors joining us via Zoom will have the opportunity to speak, of course, as well. And of course, whether if you're joining us in person or online, please wait until you are recognized to speak. As a reminder, this meeting is open to the public and is being streamed and recorded, and of course, this will be on RTD's YouTube page. And we're going to try to aim to wrap up this meeting within 2.5 hours. Going back to that note that we are streamed live, we're not only recorded, so make sure whatever you say, you would want the YouTube public to hear. So depending on how quickly or slowly we're moving through the agenda, we may need to give our CART transcription provider, excuse me, a little bit of a break, depending how much our discussion goes into the night. And then, of course, there'll be an opportunity for general and open discussion regarding any other matters. Prior to turning over the floor back to you, Chair Nevitt, I'm actually going to call on Secretary Nicholson to introduce yourself. We did introductions. If you could just talk about what district you represent and when you were elected.
Yes, hi there. I am Chris Nicholson, Board Secretary. I was elected last year in 2024, and I represent Central Denver, south of Colfax, plus Cap Hill and Central Business District, all in Denver, as well as the city of Glendale. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary. All right, Chair Nevitt, are there any welcoming remarks you'd want to make for this inaugural meeting?
Thank you, Chair Bouquet. I won't belabor this. In the immortal words of Maurice Sendak, let the wild rumpus begin.
Thank you. I love that, Chair. Oh, one more introduction. My apologies.
So, Director Levy? We don't even give you a chance to take your coat off. Yeah.
That's okay. Thanks. Sorry for delayed arrival. Claire Levy. I am a Boulder County Commissioner and a member of the Front Range Passenger Rail District Board. And I don't know what anybody else said in their introduction, but I'm happy to have this meeting and get to know everybody.
Perfect. Well, thank you again for being here. I'm going to turn it now over to our first topic, and that is going to be joint service, and that is going to be for RTD GM CO Johnson and FRPR General Manager Pace. Would you please present a quick verbal update to the assembled boards? I'll hand it now over to you, Ms. Johnson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. As introduced, Deborah Johnson, General Manager and Chief Executive Officer, and also an ex officio member of the Front Range Passenger Rail Board, and have been since the inception of said district. With that as a backdrop, I want to say greetings to Chair Nevitt, General Manager Pace, and members of the board. It's an honor to have you here this evening as we talk about joint service and all the work that we've done collectively to ensure that we could bring to fruition some elements of joint service focused on being starter service along that corridor. Just as a gentle reminder for everyone's edification, the work of this joint service endeavor really has been undertaken more than a year and a half ago, recognizing that we as a collective entity, and I'm going to step back into time when Sal Pace actually was on the Southwest Chief. I remember coming into the organization, having a meeting with him and having discussions about fast tracks and grounding myself in what is and what could be, and stated that I thought it would be great if we could have a memorandum of understanding, and Director Geisinger may remember that as she was chair, as we marched down that path, talking about being better together and how we could collectively effectively optimize efficiencies as it related to delivering greater mobility options along the Front Range. And so recognizing that there have been discussions that ensued, RTD back in 2022 went to the various jurisdictions along the Northwest Corridor and had discussions with the elected bodies and staff relative to looking at Northwest Rail peak feasibility, in the sense of we wanted to ensure that we had a common set of facts, because we are referencing documents that were somewhat dated relative to projections and things of the like. That turned out to be really instrumental, because by virtue of engaging in the Northwest Rail Peak Feasibility Study and partnering with Class 1 railroad being BNSF in this instance, it enabled us to understand what lied ahead. That information was presented to the RTD Board of Directors back in September of 2024, that served as the foundational piece as relates to the work that we're doing collectively to ground us in joint service. As both bodies know, with our representative leadership, we have been briefing people on where we are, recognizing that we entered into an intergovernmental agreement in June and July of this year that has been the catalyst relative to joint service as we know it to be today. And I'm proud to say, with the Joint Service Executive Oversight Committee, we have embarked upon some critical objectives. First and foremost, developing a plan to bring starter service along the corridor, specifically from downtown Denver Union Station to Fort Collins, and more to the point, recognizing that we're doing that in tandem with 6 entities, basically 4 representative entities from the state of Colorado, and then Front Range Passenger Rail and the Regional Transportation District. Just earlier this afternoon, there was a meeting that was held at CDOT headquarters for Joint Service Executive Oversight Committee. I have the pleasure of serving as the chair of the Joint Service Executive Oversight Committee, and I'm looking at my colleague who is serving as vice chair, which is Herman Stockinger. And then more to the point, as we talk about our discussions and negotiations with BNSF, I serve as a co-chair of the negotiating committee along with Mr. Pace, and then we have Lisa Kaufman from the governor's office serving as the chair of those negotiations. We kicked off negotiations in August. No, I stand corrected. We had introductory meetings the latter part of August after the intergovernmental agreement was effectuated, and moved into discussions in September. Some critical elements, quite naturally, are focused on the operability of the alignment, more specifically as we look at use agreement terms and conditions, and then recognizing that the Northwest Rail Peak Feasibility Study's 30% design is being used as more or less a data source relative to future engineering work that needs to be done. What I can share is that Ms. Kaufman, Mr. Pace, and I were recently in Fort Worth meeting with BNSF, and I will share they have been very amenable to the needs of Colorado, and I believe are working in good faith. There are some issues that are outstanding. We are confident in the fact that we are progressing with meetings that will continue over the next week to 2 weeks, contingent upon holiday schedules, and would hope to be before our respective bodies in a closed session, briefing you all on the status of those negotiations. With that as a backdrop, I will yield the floor to my colleague, Mr. Pace, to provide some additional information as we move forward. Thank you very kindly for the opportunity to address both bodies.
Mr. Pace?
Thank you, GM Johnson, thank you for the opportunity to talk on this exciting project. I've been talking about this, I feel like, for a decade, behind your backs. And as a former Pueblo County Commissioner, you might wonder, why would a Pueblo County Commissioner care about joint service or the Northwest Line? And it's because a coalition of folks formed in southeastern Colorado to save a Amtrak long-distance train that was at risk of being lost. And we were able to team up with rural farmers in western Kansas and small communities in northern New Mexico and come together and raise money to save the Southwest Chief Line. And we contemplated, why do we want to do this? And what is the purpose beyond just saving it? And can we connect rural Colorado and southern Colorado to the rest of the state? And so began a long campaign to try to bring Front Range Rail to Colorado. In particular, Boulder area legislators were always the bane of getting Front Range done. As I glare at my friend Claire Levy, not really glare, but insisting that we had to address the concern, the problems of money being invested into fast tracks for a Northwest line that was never developed. And in fact, one Boulder area speaker of the House killed a Front Range passenger district bill for a couple sessions before we were ever able to bring one back. And I led negotiations on that bill. And the toughest negotiations were with Boulder County representatives, with Director Levy fighting for her territory and for the Northwest line. And even in our enabling legislation that passed in 2021, it contemplated that it could be joint service with RTD. That's in our enabling legislation, because we understood that the biggest political hurdle to getting a district-wide tax approved for Front Range passenger rail was the fact that we had opposition from people who didn't receive the train who had paid for it previously. And this threat to Front Range Rail turned into an opportunity. Could Front Range Passenger Rail and RTD collaborate to deliver the service that had been promised while also being the building blocks for Front Range Passenger Rail? And so I see joint service as an important phase in Front Range Passenger Rail. It is either phase 1 or phase 0 of Front Range Passenger Rail, so that we can tell the voters of Colorado that if they're going to invest their money into a rail project that is going to be delivered, and that we can't be seen as taking people's money and not delivering on the promise that we made to them. And so, believe it or not, my constituents, or my old constituents in Pueblo, who pay attention to rail, are very attuned to what's happening with Northwest Rail, because as we've explored putting a ballot measure to the voters, what the research has shown us is if we leave this hanging out there, this unfulfilled promise, that we will never get the support of the voters. In fact, counterintuitive, it seems counterintuitive, but the polling shows that voters even south of the metro area have that this argument works stronger with them than they do even to the north. And so for the sake of my old constituents in Pueblo, and for communities like Fort Collins and Colorado Springs and everyone in between, I see delivering joint service to the Northwest as an important building block to passing Front Range Rail and delivering the promise. So I'm excited to be a part of the negotiating team with GM Johnson and the state of Colorado. And I feel like we have a partner at the table in BNSF who is negotiating in good faith. We will very shortly have a proposal and a term sheet to come back to all our partners to share with. And I think when that happens, and hopefully I think by mid-January, hopefully that'll all be public and back before this body, that we can maybe all reconvene and discuss hard numbers that are in front of everybody.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, GMCO Johnson and GM Pace, for your presentation. With that being said, I'll hand it over if there's any questions or discussion regarding this matter from the directors on either boards. Okay.
Can I share one thing?
Sure. Director O'Keefe.
This RTD board, although a couple people were giving their ages as, I think, kind of a hurtful point, that they were alive but didn't vote on it. I did vote on it. I voted for fast tracks a quarter century ago. I've been lucky to have a seat next to, there's some people on this board that are adamantly in favor of joint service. That I've sat next to for a while, and there's some people that I think are more skeptical. I'm probably in the middle of that group, but I wanted to give you a perspective of a district that would be touched by front range passenger rail for sure, but is also one of the aggrieved districts from fast tracks. So there are 4 unfinished lines for fast tracks: L, W, the B, and the D, C. I mean, Southwest Corridor. 2 of those have received 0 money, 0. L and the CD, 0 money. And so I actually I have constituents all over. There's people that love rail and would love the idea of taking a intercity passenger rail to the south or to the north up to Fort Collins. And so there's a lot of excitement with that. I'm under no belief that the extension of the Southwest Corridor will ever be covered in fast tracks. It never will be built. It's about a $600 million extension for 3 miles. And so that's a tough thing to explain to people in our district. The money isn't there. Fast tracks, we could pull apart the estimates that went into it, the promises that were made. The flat truth is there are 4 aggrieved districts that there isn't enough to fund what was promised to them, period. So what is interesting about this, and I got a really polite conversation or call from the governor asking me where I stood on joint service and Northwest Rail. And I told him, I said, under no circumstances should RTD build it. I just don't think that we're in a position to negotiate the best deal for the passengers that would ride it. And I think it needs to be contemplated in a bigger geographic area. And I think joint service is the way to go. And I don't know if he's kind of stunned someone from Douglas County is telling him, I think joint service has a lot of merit, but and I'm sorry that maybe Lisa Coughton is listening in. In fact, I'd be willing to bet $20 to anyone in the room that she's listening in. That when I talked to her, it was a different negotiation, and it gave the state is in an infinitely better position to negotiate this deal on behalf of a much broader swath of people. The state has many more authorities than RTD does, and so I'm very open to this new way to fulfill what I think is still an unfulfilled promise. And that's the one thing that's commonality among the districts that have not received their fast tracks promises. It's that we were all promised something. The state doesn't vote for taxes easily. I think everyone's kind of noticed that. And when they vote for something, we should take it pretty darn seriously. And that is something I tell people in my district. Why do you have an open mind for this? We have get nothing out of it. Said this is a promise that was made to taxpayers, and just like we aren't going to get our extension, this is probably the one path to fulfill this promise, at least in the near future. And so I think it's an exciting opportunity. I think there'll be a lot of directors that have a different lens in how they look at this. My lens is definitely not at any price will RTD participate, but we do have an obligation to at least listen to this as a potential opportunity. And I was kind of filibustering to see if Karen was going to throw something in. But thank you for listening to a bit of that diatribe. But I think it's a really important perspective that, there are districts that are open, I think are open to listing, but they're also going to be asked to pay for it, and they're probably not going to get their promises fulfilled. And that's just going to be the tough tension that we've got with our vote down the road.
Thank you very much, Director O'Keefe. Director Mulvey?
Yes, thank you. And I hail from the same location, and there are definitely mixed views. And one of the things that I wanted to emphasize was that the Front Range Passenger Rail District mandate under the statute is to build it from end to end, the entire line. And the joint service really will serve the first phase, which is north of Denver. And the most important thing that I think to emphasize to residents of our mutual region, Mr. O'Keefe, is that Front Range Passenger Rail may not partner with RTD south of Denver in the South Metro region in our districts. And there's a lot of discussion about that. There's a lot of discussion about the feelings about fast tracks and RTD. And my and your constituents agree that there is a gap in the distribution of fast tracks funds when it comes to the South Metro region from Parker to Highlands Ranch to Littleton. But I do agree with you that this is a first step to fulfill what is, in fact, a statutory mandate to build the Northwest region first. And so I appreciate and agree with a lot of what you said. And so thank you.
Thank you very much, Director.
Thanks for that.
I have Director Nicholson and then Director Rusha. And then Director Harwick, I'm going to call on you to introduce yourself. Director Nicholson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So my question is actually about timing, because we were talking about having a term sheet around mid-January, and maybe this will fit better under the ballot goals section. But I'm wondering, how does the timing of approval for the fiscal plan, I might be financial plan, of joint service fit into the planning of FRPR? And the reason I ask that question is, I just had a town hall with 40-something constituents, and I've been talking about this issue around the district, and my district is deeply skeptical. And so it's important to me to take the time, once we do have hard numbers, to actually run them by people in my district. And I plan to hold a number of listening sessions about the joint service financial plan before I make a decision, because I think it's a big decision. And so I want to understand how this timing fits into the timing of FRPR and going to the ballot and all of that.
GM Pace, would you like to take it?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Director Nicholson. So we'll be laying out a presentation after this with our ballot access plan. We do have a couple inflection points where we're going to review go, no-go decision points. One of them is going to be at the end of April, and then another one at the end of July. And so, we need to see if we meet our steps in this process and whether or not we're meeting all of our own personal goals at those two inflection points, whether or not we go forward or not. So we're not going to be making a final decision on going to the ballot, and we have not made a final decision probably until middle of summer.
Thank you. Director?
Just sort of as to put a fine point on the follow-up question, when, and maybe again we can defer this, but when do you need an approval from us by in order to be able to go to the ballot? Could we wait till June or July to say yes on the financial plan for joint service? And how would that impact going to the ballot by FRPR?
I don't know the answer to that. I think, we have to talk to BNSF and find out what their time period is, when they need to hear from us. I think it's helpful if we, the earlier we button this up, it's sort of a little smoother. However, you guys have your own process that you have to take. We have to limit the amount of opposition we have. And we're doing everything we can to try to pull together, a whole lot of stakeholders and receive a lot of input from a lot of elected officials and community leaders. It's going to be pretty critical that we're not fighting elected officials in places like Boulder County for Front Range Rail. I think, if we are, then, we're not going to pass. And so I think that's an important, important political consideration that we have to make. Certainly if, we're going to spend some money on outreach and engagement. We're going to spend money on talking to our constituents, getting their input, hearing what they have to say. If joint service isn't going to go forward, we could save the taxpayers, a little bit of money, some significant dollars in our budget if we knew it wasn't going to go forward and not do such a robust engagement plan. So, it's certainly helpful to know earlier rather than later.
Perfect. Director Levy?
I wanted to be in the queue, but I thought there were some people ahead of me.
Perfect.
Yeah,
I'll go to Director Ruscia and then to you, Director. Thank you. Director Ruscia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have two questions, and I apologize if we're going out of order based on our agenda. So I'm also happy I'm okay if the answers need to be addressed later on in the meeting. But first, the reports, I should note, mentions polling showing that the unfinished portions of fast tracks is a barrier to voter support for FRPR. And I've mentioned this in meetings before, but I just think it bears repeating. That's not a sentiment that I get in my district. That's anecdotal evidence, obviously, but I don't have access to the polling itself, and I don't think that has been published. So I have requested this before. I requested the last time we had a visit from CDOT, and I was just wondering if folks in charge or whomever has this data would be able to share it with this board. The polling results, crosstabs, methodology, timing, et cetera, so that we can clearly understand the basis, because that sentiment does reflect on the agency. And I think it just impacts both our ability to provide service and, our ability to maintain voter trust, as well as the states and the FRPR district. So that was my first question. And then second, I think this might have been touched on before me. This is why I never should go after Director O'Keefe. He says things better, but I just want to flag the promise of service to Pueblo. So I am increasingly concerned that by focusing almost entirely on the northern segment, not just in the planning stage, I understand that, but also in terms of our public relations and in our engagement, we're putting the broader FRPR vision at risk, particularly for those communities south of Denver who are counting on these investments. And so to that end, I was wondering, are we planning on going to the ballot in segments or perhaps create sub-districts? Because even if RTD isn't involved, like in the southern portion, I do think that voters are smart, and that elephant in the room could absolutely impact support for what we're discussing today. So I am concerned about our friends in the Springs and Pueblo and the like, and I think that's a sentiment my friend Sal Pace probably has as well. So, I'm afraid that Pueblo is going to become the next Northwest corridor, and I just don't know, realistically what that timeline looks like or what that relationship looks like. So if anyone can provide, a clear answer to that, and if that has also been considered in terms of voter trust concerns dealing with this segment, I'd really appreciate that. It's not meant to be a curveball question by any means, but it's been weighing on my mind, and I suspect others as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and whomever answers my
Thank you very
question.
much, Director Risha. GM Pace, I know that our next topic discussion is regarding the 2026 ballot goals. It's more than appropriate if you want to answer post-presentation or whenever you feel comfortable, so.
Yeah, well, I think on the first question that we'll touch on that a bit in the next presentation. And then as far as the phasing, I think perhaps the presentation for the service development plan will touch on the phasing. But, you know, what I can tell you is phase one in the SDP, service development plan, phase one is going to the northwest, 3 trains a day. And phase two goes to the south and starts with 2 trains to Pueblo. And so this is a phased incremental approach, and hopefully the SDP presentation will touch a little bit more on the plan.
Director Risha, is that? Oh, yes, Director Risha. You're on mute.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Jan Pace. Hopefully we can get to more detail on that later. But in the meantime, do you think that the polling data that the FRPR board has and staff on the CDOT side could be shared with the RTD board for reasons I mentioned earlier?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you for the questions. Director Levy?
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to speak up, and I think I can express this on behalf of our whole board, that while the opportunity arose to do this Northwest segment, thanks in large part to Senate Bill 184, and you know, the ability to bring some funding to the table to make a significant, you know, dent in this 190-mile segment, the board has never lost its focus on the entire corridor. And as General Manager Pace was laying out, you know, this starting with this and taking advantage of this funding opportunity, you know, does, I believe, and I think the board agrees, does put the entire district on better footing. And as I listen to some of the directors here on RTD, and I understand kind of that thought of, well, it's my constituents may not ever use this, but it really is part of a vision for a degree of connectedness that we've never been able to have in Colorado. And I'm excited to be part of this because I think it is really the first step, and we're going to have Mountain Rail, and we've got all kinds of other opportunities. And I also think, as someone who's been in public life for a long time and been, you know, was a very strong supporter of fast tracks, and I'm a very strong supporter of RTD in general, that the opportunity to get at least some starter service on one of these unbuilt rail lines helps the reputation of RTD in general. And so while it may not serve Southwest metro area immediately, it may not serve, you know, Central Denver, or may not be perceived to, I think it helps the district. So I hope that the board can look at it in that light. Thanks.
Thank you, Director. Director Peck?
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to thank Commissioner Levy for what she just mentioned. And going forward, FRPR has had in discussions, how do we make that connectivity with everyone in the district, even if they are not on the major line? And I think that collaboration with RTD on that issue later, when we are actually working on the South, it would be a very, very good conversation. And we've already had those conversations so that no one is left out.
Thank you, Director Peck. Director Nicholson?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, so first off, I appreciate the comments of Director Mayor Peck and Commissioner Levy. I think, you know, when we're talking about good for my district, not good for my district, I mean, my district is actually, I'm walking distance to Union Station. This would probably be pretty good for me personally, even if it's not necessarily good for the people who live on the other side of my district who can't walk to Union Station. for me, it's a question of, is this worth the money? You know, are we using taxpayer funds well? Not necessarily will my constituents benefit from it, but how does it compare to the 15, the 0, the light rail, the commuter rail that we already run in terms of value proposition? This is a little bit of a glib thing for me to say, but, you know, to Chair Levy's, to Commissioner Levy's point, what may have been a vision 25 years ago could be a hallucination today. And we have to think through whether something really makes sense, soup to nuts, before we do it. So I just wanted to put that in context.
Thank you. Director Banker?
Hi. I'd like to put a more positive spin on some of these things. First of all, the cities along the Northwest Rail Line have paid RTD over $700 million over the past 20 years. $700 million, and we haven't received anything. In fact, our bus service was cut. I see the state as a partner is a wonderful opportunity to make this happen. And I suspect folks in Denver and folks in Highlands Ranch someday may want to take the train up to Boulder and to Fort Collins. So this is going to benefit everybody on the Front Range. And by partnering with the state and Front Range Passenger Rail, this is just an exceptional opportunity. The doors are opening. We have this chance, and now is our time to go through and say yes to this and move forward and get this done. And we need to finish all 4 pieces of fast tracks. I'm not saying we just do 1 or 2. There are ways to figure out how to do all 4 that are missing. But working together, I think we can figure this out. So thank you so much for coming forward. We really do want to work with you, and we'll figure out a finance plan in the next couple of months.
Thank you very much. Director Nicholson?
Yeah, I was just wondering if, I know we have Brendan Schaefer in the back from the Gov's office. I was wondering if he could chime in as well on some of the discussion we've just had.
Chief, you're more than welcome to, but it might be appropriate to keep it moving from now on if you're okay with that. Sounds good. Thank you. All right, I will go to Director Ruscia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to clarify in case my message was lost. When I referenced voters in my district and my constituents, I was talking about the perception of public trust as it relates to transportation funding and Northwest Passenger Rail. I wasn't attempting to pit communities against each other or talk about specific modes of transit. So I just wanted to put that out there in case I was misunderstood. Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Director Ruscia. All right, we're going to keep us going because we do have several items we need to get to. Prior to that, Director Harwick, if you wouldn't mind quickly introducing yourself, when you were elected, and the areas you represent.
Everybody, my name is Ian Harwick, District L. I represent Arvada and this kind of sliver of Southwest Adams County. I was elected in 2022 and will be up for election in 2026. Really excited to have this conversation. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye. And also, I got to cut out. I got a kids choir that I got to go to soon. So, but thank you.
Understand. Thank you, Director. Moving on to our next item, that is the Front Range Passenger Rail District 2026 ballot goals, and I will give it over to GM Pace to present this item.
Thank you. When I was hired for this position, I was asked to work towards putting us in the best position possible for delivering a ballot question in 2026. However, that decision has not been made whether or not to go in 2026, but if we can lay the groundwork and put us in the strongest position, then it's groundwork that can be used later if we decide not to go. A little bit about Front Range Passenger Rail District, created in 2021, talked a little bit about that history. With the statutory direction to plan, finance, construct, and operate intercity passenger rail from state line to state line, from Wyoming to New Mexico. The statute required that we explore joint service with RTD, and we're empowered to refer question to the district voters for approval. I've listed the communities that are officially recognized in our plan for service under Front Range Passenger Rail, and I mentioned special event stops and a nice AI-generated Broncos Express train. And we've heard from and we've met with the Broncos who are interested in having a station at Burnham Yard, and I think it's an exciting opportunity, as well as potentially other special event stops, such as the new women's soccer team, the Denver Summit, for example. We are 3 years in on a service development plan. It's near completion. Since we're going to have a separate presentation on this, I'll just let you know that there's been a lot of time and effort and work and money and resources put into planning for Front Range Passenger Rail. We ultimately leaned into alternative 3 as the alternative to do the deep dive study on. This is 10 round trips at 79 miles per hour. You'll notice the last bullet point, exploring going up to 90 miles an hour only saved 4 minutes of travel time, because so much of the entire route is too windy or too hilly to actually hit maximum speeds. The SDP studied, and the focus of the SDP was using existing freight right away and sharing trackage with our Class 1 friends. And that's to make the most efficient use of voters and taxpayer dollars. So much of the overrun in let's say, high-speed rail in California is tied to property acquisition, eminent domain costs, et cetera. Working with Class 1 railroads and using existing infrastructure allows us to be more fiscally responsible with taxpayer dollars. So we've put together and approved a ballot access plan at our November 19th board meeting. And our efforts from now through July are going to be focused on preparing us for placing a question to the voters of the district. We are going to be engaging with stakeholders and constituents of the district aggressively over the next 7 months, and a two-way conversation where we aren't just going to be sharing information, but we want to hear from the constituents of the district. And this is about building public trust, providing information, being transparent, and putting a plan to the public that is realistic, and they have buy-in, and they've helped with the engagement process. The ballot access plan, as I mentioned, approved the 19th. The purpose is to prepare us for a referral. Always, we want to ensure transparency and statutory compliance. And as I mentioned to Director Nicholson earlier, we have 2 go, no-go inflection points. We're calling phase 1 now through the end of April, where we'll be working on technical and financial readiness. And then phase 2 will be our second go, no-go inflection point in July, whether or not to actually refer something to the voters of the district. One core component is delivering a refined operating plan. We know that there are some refinements to the service development plan to improve operational feasibility and updates as a result of joint service, for instance. We have not finalized a location in Douglas County. We want to finalize that piece, as well as any other related tweaks that need to be made. We know that the Broncos are interested in a station, and this is an alteration from the service development plan that only contemplated or didn't contemplate any stops between Littleton and Denver Union Station. And, you know, we plan on coordinating, we are coordinating with the existing service development consultant team, which provides efficiencies and ensure that we are not rebuilding models from scratch. An exciting component of our project is exploring station area planning. And the concept here is to work with the local communities, let local communities help drive their vision for what station development can be. You know, all of you here in the metro area know how transformative Denver Union Station has been for Denver, the commercial activity that it has driven. The vision that we're talking about is to not build park and rides, but rather to build commercial hubs for the cities up and down the Front Range. These are areas that can be walkable, that can be bikeable, that are multimodal centers, that support TODs, and if the district is bringing money to the table for communities after we have buying power when we pass a ballot measure, then communities should help meet some of these goals of developing walkable commercial centers for Front Range passenger rail stations. And so we're doing an aggressive outreach and discussion with the communities up and down the Front Range, the 13 communities for Front Range passenger rail, to collect their thoughts, collect their visions, and help put them into a packet for the constituents of the district to understand. And it'll be a benefit not just to the users of the train, but also people who care about smart development in their urban core. We'll be conducting research. Right now, we're undergoing a precinct analysis to review the boundaries of our district. When we passed the district in 2021, we did not know the route alignment. In fact, we were studying 3 different routes at the time. And now we know our route alignment, so we can look at our district boundaries. We'll be conducting some polling at the end of phase 1 to determine a go, no-go. And all research stops, obviously, after referral and always compliant with Fair Campaign Practices Act and Tabor and all state statutes. We're putting together 2 comprehensive financing plans, a financial plan and an implementation plan. The financial plan will describe how funds will be managed, allocated, and safeguarded. The implementation plan links funding to actual service outcomes. And we are unveiling a very aggressive outreach engagement strategy as consistent with our statutory responsibilities for transparent engagement. We'll be developing an online platform to provide support for engagement, two-way engagement, and help the constituents share information and pass along information to the district. We're going to plan 30+ town hall meetings in the next 5 months up and down the Front Range, and bring on and develop a group of coalition engagement partners and station engagement partners to help with the outreach and engagement with these various coalitions. And then final piece, we have to prepare for referral. We'll be going through a branding exercise that we will bring to our board retreat in January, explore our messaging, our image, our public-facing brand, our service brand. For instance, when the Gulf Coast Commission approved a train into New Orleans, well, they spent about a decade working on it, but it finally, maybe 15 years working on it, finally got implemented this year. They didn't call it the Gulf Coast Coalition train. It It's called the Mardi Gras Express. So we're going to be exploring our board at our board retreat, what the name and brand of the Front Range train is going to be. It might be Front Range Passenger Rail, or that might be a little too long and wonky. So we're going to be exploring branding as a district. We're going to enter into MOUs with the Class 1 railroads or host railroads. And we understand that until we have buying power, until we pass a ballot measure, that the host railroads are not going to negotiate rail access agreements in advance. These are very comprehensive and expensive agreements to put together. And so the MOUs are going to say that we have an intention of fully negotiating these detailed rail access agreements upon passage of a ballot measure. But I can assure you, and when we get into the SDP presentation, you'll hear that there's already been very detailed discussions with the Class 1 railroads, the host railroads. And then we'll put together ballot access agreements with our host communities to plan to go to the ballot if we decide to go in 2026. A Gantt chart that you can barely read, but outlines some of the planning phases, and it's also in your packets, and I can provide it electronically as well. So that is the outline of our ballot access plan. We're really excited. We've been working on this for years, and we now have a clear direction to aim for 2026, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, GM Pace. Director O'Keefe, start us off.
Just real quick, Director Pace, I wanted to encourage you, this straddles this topic and the next one, that as you're getting ready to go to the ballot or developing technical analysis, please ask if there's something we can help with. I know we have deeper resources than the district does, and I hope you'll ask, and then we can decide if it's appropriate, given our limitations and our resources, but certainly I'd encourage you to ask.
Thank you.
Director.
We will.
Director Chandler, Director Larson, Director Geisinger, Director Nicholson, and then Director Ruscia is the queue. Director Chandler.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the presentation. Kind of a two-part question. What happens if you decide not to go to the ballot in 2026? Are you mandated to wait until 2028? That would be my first question. And then the second question is, with no park and rides available and more of a TOD, transit-oriented development, that for my particular area, I mean, the closest park and ride really for us is 9 Mile. And from my home alone, it's almost 6 miles. And if there was no place for my constituents to park at the 9 Mile, they probably wouldn't take something like that. So when you're talking about excessively more of a localized transit-oriented development, that might be great for those that live there. But if you're asking my area, which is already very service sparse, to buy into a system where you have to walk to it or there is no other place to park, that's a hard sell. I think that's a really hard sell for those that are outside, rather far away. I think this is an opportunity to allow those, like in my area, to get to this and then use it. It is not really an opportunity for us to use it from where we can't get to it. So that's my other comment.
Thank you. And if we don't go in 26, then we're probably looking at 28. And as far as talking about planning, I didn't mean to imply that there wouldn't be parking available. And in fact, part of the service development plan is to model out how much parking is needed at each station. And they've gone into detail exactly the exact number of parking spots needed. I think what I tried to imply, maybe it didn't come out so eloquently, was that that these should be commercial hubs that support and enhance urban downtowns and creating smart communities. And certainly there will be areas to park, and we don't want to design something that isn't easy to use for everybody.
Thank you, Director. Thank you, GM. Director Larson.
I have sort of the converse question, I think, to Director Chandler, which is, When I've looked at where I understand the stops to be for the northwest part of the Front Range Rail, what I've noticed is that some of them seem to be very empty right now of anything. And I guess a concern I have with particularly the Northwest project is that those communities, despite the incentives that you've mentioned, which I would like to understand better, won't actually sort of take the measures in terms of their upzoning and things like that that they would need in order to provide kind of the dense activity and residences that would actually enable some of the ridership projections to, bear out. In fact, if they don't, I mean, it could be that we already have one line in our system at RTD that basically it ends and it's surrounded by nothing. And I don't think we get a whole lot of ridership from that. What are those incentives for station area planning that you mentioned, and how much confidence do you have that some of these communities, I mean, one of which that is suing the state against its efforts to require them to do transit-oriented development, what is your confidence that these communities will actually create the kind of the transit-oriented development that would drive ridership?
GM Pace.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I need to be clear, we have not adopted a formal policy, and it's something we're going to discuss at our board retreat in January and hopefully coalesce around some policies while we're there. And I think you're spot on. And if we do this development right, I think the train will be transformative, and I think it'll bring Colorado into the 21st century. But perhaps even more impactful is if we do the station areas and the multimodal piece the right way. That if we can encourage TODs, if we can encourage multimodal activity, we can start to encourage people to reconsider their transportation uses and habits, that we can be really transformative. And I think, I don't want to speak for my board, but I can't imagine that we'd do anything that would be, that we would support that would tie anyone's hands. But I think if we're bringing money to the table for stations, perhaps we can use that as an incentive to encourage smart development. But ultimately, it should be, the station areas should be developed by the local cities and in the vision that they want and they see. But I think we can provide some extra incentive to encourage smart development.
Thank you very much. Director Geisinger.
Thanks very much. I'm glad to hear that you're moving forward with the push with the public and to hear back from what they're saying for 2026. But I think you also made a statement earlier that the research shows that if Northwest Rail promise remains unfilled, you'll never get the voter support. And, a piece of that is that to win a tax, you have to win Boulder County by a lot, right? And so I am a little surprised that 2026 is going to be far enough along this project to go to the ballot. But thought I'd ask your thoughts.
GM.
Thank you. I'm a bit of the opinion that we've been studying this for decades, and we can keep kicking the can down the road, or we can try to take action. I'll be the first to say I will not advocate for referral to the voters if I think that we're going to lose. That'll set us back even more. And so 2026 is a goal, and I'd love to get there, but if we can't get there, then we set ourselves up for 2028.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. Director Nicholson.
So since we're doing converses, I kind of want to talk about the converse of Lynn's question, which is, for me, you know, from the start of joint service, I was basically you've got to be kidding me. And when I heard that we were talking about going to the ballot in 2026, in the same year that we'd be voting on joint service, I thought to myself for the first time, hey, I might actually be able to support this. And the reason why is simple. Going for FRPR after approving joint service functionally gives the voters a way to say, do I want this or not? It gives the people in my district a way to vote on rail. My biggest concern with this is that I don't want to approve joint service if the voters reject rail in November. So I am very interested in moving forward with the joint service vote so long as it is conditional on the success of the ballot measure. And I am very not interested in moving forward with the joint service vote if it would continue after the voters, if they did, rejected the ballot measure. But you know, everybody on this board kind of knows I have a bias to action, and I'm someone who likes taking risks. And I think we should, if we do this, we should go all in on it. I think this is a bet the generation choice for public transportation, and it's an opportunity to fundamentally change the landscape for us. And so yeah, my perspective, having heard this, is I think it's a ballot measure we can win. I think it's something that people are going to want to buy into, and it's really a go big or go home moment for me. And if Boulder County can't get on board with that, well, then they don't get their train.
Okay. Director Ruscia?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you kindly, Mr. Pace, for the presentation. So I just wanted to return to my earlier question about ballot structure. That question wasn't an engineering question. And I just want to make sure that we get clarity on the ballot approach and not just the service phasing. And so, I mean, since the bulk of the FRPR district will not receive phase one service, I just want to understand as clearly as I can at this point in time, is the district, your district, considering a segmented ballot approach or like sub-districts, or is the intent still a single wide measure? I think that clarity is really important for all of our partners as we think about voter trust and feasibility, as well as, you know, public relations and ensuring that communities, news agencies, et cetera, do understand what our plans are moving forth. You mentioned that phase one polling would determine the district's, I think you phrased it as a go, no-go decision about whether or not to move forward. And I just, similar to my earlier question, you know, will that polling be shared with the board? And will it specifically test, well, I guess I don't want to ask you on what polling methodology you're using, but I might suggest that we test support from communities that are not receiving phase one service. And regarding that no-go decision, you referenced like the comprehensive financial plan as is required, describing how funds will be managed and safeguarded. So either here or later on in the presentation, would you be able to just address more comprehensively like how that plan would include cost caps or protections against overruns? Or when can RTD expect to receive a draft or update to that effect, just recognizing that some things have changed since the last time we've had an update from the board. And then finally, a note on park and rides and TOD. Is there anything that the legislature can do through incentives or requirements to ensure that that development is appropriate? Like, I don't want stations without any parking because parking can enable multimodal access when done right. And that's part of why CDOT doesn't charge for parking because they, you know, want to encourage multimodal transit and carpooling. But I also don't want us boxed into building concrete jungles because local jurisdictions feel that's the way to go. So just for some context, as I noted before, I do represent the far northeast, and I represent Central Park Station and Peoria Station. And those would be two examples of stations that we're improving now, but I never want to see built like that again. So I appreciate both my colleague uh, uh, Chandler and Director Larson in flagging the parking question. So just to restate my questions clearly, the first one is, as of this date, right now, what we know is our future ballot measures envisioned as like segmented or sub-district based. The second is, will the phase 1 go, no-go polling be shared with RTD? And will it test support in non-phase 1 communities? And then 3, which might be a follow-up question or a later memo, how will the financial plan include cost caps or protections against overruns? And then 4, are there tools that are either exist in statute or we could lobby for to ensure appropriate TOD on future stations? Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Jim?
Thank you, Director Arusha. Very long list of good questions there. First, I'll start with the financial modeling piece. And I need to give Director Commissioner Levy a lot of credit here as we were drafting and negotiating the implementing legislation for Front Range Passenger Rail. She insisted on some of the most stringent financial modeling language that you could imagine. And with some of the overruns and concerns from unfinished promises being top of mind for her. So what I can tell you is right now the service development plan is 3 years in on research and is fairly comprehensive. We've already spent $500,000 with Ernst & Young on financial modeling. We also now have, that'll soon be shared with you and the public, hard financial numbers from Burlington Northern for joint service. And so I feel like we will be in as strong a position as any Title 32 special district has ever been to provide accurate numbers to the voters of the district. As far as phasing and segmenting, right now we don't have the statutory authority to segment our district. It's a conversation we're having internally as we contemplate legislation in the 2026 legislative session. Personally, I think if we segment our district that, and I haven't surveyed our board, but I think in all likelihood we'd want to go simultaneously for the very reason that we've discussed previously, which is we do not want to leave part of the district behind. But what that could do is allow parts of the district to, and we want to ensure everyone has an opportunity to move forward, but it would allow parts of the district to potentially go forward when they're ready and other parts to maybe wait for a future year. But that needs further discussion on our board, and we have not coalesced around that. As far as polling, everything that we do with public dollars will be public, and we will happy to share all of the results and research with you and anyone else in the public. And point number 4 on the TODs, I think I took good notes here and hit all your points. Number 4, I hope that we can support and encourage TODs in a incentive-based approach from the district. And I think that the General Assembly could potentially provide a package to encourage TODs in a way that's an incentive-based model as well.
Whoa. Thank you, GM. Director Arusha.
Thank you, and thank you for being a good sport. I appreciate that and your good notes. So just a follow-up on the idea of segmenting portions of the district. Are we legally allowed to tax certain areas of the district in segments, like phase in taxation for certain areas that would receive service later on, even if the vote occurs all at once? That's a legitimate question. I tried to find that myself before our meeting, and I don't know the answer. If that is a complex legal question, I'm happy to get a follow-up email on that matter. But I just want to, the segmenting has been just discussed in meetings, and I'm not, as an individual saying that is the way to go. But I'm curious because we've talked about it so much over the last year and a half, and I'm just wondering what some of those options might be. And again, if that's a question that needs to be discussed later, that's totally fine. I don't want to, take time away from our allotted slot on the agenda. Thank you.
I can answer that quickly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right now, we legally can't do that, but it's something that could be explored with the General Assembly.
Thank you for the question. Director Banker, and then I have Director Putnam.
Okay. First of all, this is a lot of fun being a part of Colorado's future and being a part of it. It's such an opportunity. To go to what Director Chandler had mentioned about reaching out to some of the stations, not only is it important to have maybe not a park and ride, but a garage, but it's also important to have a transit center. So hopefully, RTD is going to be a big part of that, since that was also promised in Fast Tracks, that buses would be going in and out to make sure that we take full advantage of rail. Going back to your service delivery plan, though, it has been 3 years in the making, and it sounds like it's almost complete. So once it's complete, will you be able to come back and share that information with us? It would be great. I don't know if it's possible to bring together another meeting like this. Perhaps maybe folks could be a little bit closer to us so we could have a good discussion. But I'm very interested to see what's coming out of the service delivery plan. And then also, I'm assuming you're probably starting to have discussions about the level of taxation and how those dollars might be earmarked. Do you have any information that you could share with us now, or is it too early?
Yeah, we have not determined a taxation rate. We are capped statutorily at half a penny. So that's the highest we could go for sales tax.
Okay, and then just one other suggestion. Since Boulder County and Broomfield County, we are a bit skeptical about all of this because, of course, as we all know, we've been paying for it and nothing has happened. Would it be possible to talk to Burlington Northern to start running a couple of trains, even if it was just once a week, so that people can actually see it and hopefully understand that this could actually happen? Do you know whether or not the railroad would be open to something like that?
Jim Pace.
A couple of minutes ago, Chairman Nevitt poked me and he said, maybe you should ask Brent to answer some of these questions. But I think that's certainly a possibility. We could ask him.
Excellent.
Brent raised his hand. He's ready.
Brent.
He's our legal
Mr.
counsel.
Happy to. Going back to the previous question on the phase tax. The short answer is that some of these are complicated legal questions, and I think to the extent a follow-up would be helpful with anyone, I think we're happy to provide that. I think it'd be tough to do in this forum.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Director Putnam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and really just want to focus a little bit on the importance of thinking through this ballot measure as a bellwether for further revenue development. I think regardless of what happens with Front Range, we're going to need more money for transit and for transportation in Colorado, whether that's RTD, whether that's the state, whether that's other municipalities. And so we need to think about collectively how we're going to be able to get to those places. And I think that's a few things. One, we do need to address the trust issue. I'm a Boulder resident. I did vote for Fast Tracks as well as its predecessor and have been paying for it. And so, you know, to the question of whether voters will vote for it, they have voted for it and they've been paying for it. And I think trust is critical, and delivering some wins through joint service are critical, I think, to developing that, but also building trust. So whether it's Boulder County, Jefferson County, Denver County, all the counties, we're going to be able to get to that place. But we also need to deliver on some, you know, vision and achievable wins, and I think TOD is a critical part of that. To that point, not only have we been, you know, voting for it and paying for it, we've been planning for it. And I look at Mayor Peck in Longmont. I know you've been doing a lot of development and planning around TOD in the vicinity of the station. Boulder has, and that development's already started. There's more to come. And you can look up and down, all the way down to Pueblo and Trinidad and Fort Collins, and I think there's a lot of potential for that development in there. But I take a look, and GM Pace mentioned the Mardi Gras service, which I worked on when I was at USDOT. That started service this summer, and they're already greatly exceeding ridership and expectations. The Hiawatha service that was added between Chicago and Minneapolis, already exceeding expectations. There's hunger for this, and we need to deliver wins, not seek what's perfect, but do things that are possible, and this is within reach. And so I think it's critical for all of us, taking off just my narrow Front Range hat, to be able to deliver these wins. And I think want to bring my neighbors in Boulder along, so that, you know, we're going to be supportive of region-wide and statewide initiatives, again, and not have this be in the way.
Thank you very much, Director. Director Mulvey?
Thank you. I am the chair of the Government Affairs and Communication Committee, and so in that context, not only do I want to weigh in as a board member, but also want to invite both the public and the directors to confer with us on some of the big issues that have been raised. For example, the station that appears not to go anywhere. There's actually quite a bit of planning involved already in plotting of residential development, including high density, including multifamily, including single family in that exact vicinity. And so it's part of a greater plan. And I think it's incumbent on all of us who have constituents and who are elected to think forward, to look forward, and to plan ahead, and to consider those things when we're looking at what's appropriate and what's desired by the communities. And we are exactly doing that in Douglas County. And in South Metro includes a very big part of Douglas County, and the area is unique. And so I want to add as well that part of that planning includes what is needed in that region. And there's a considerable amount of advocacy going on with respect to what a Douglas County community needs for a rail station in the context of what is already plotted out, in the context of what the businesses require. We are looking at economic development. We are looking at economic development corridors. We are looking at where residents will be situated. We are looking at new modes of transportation that are not covered by RTD, such as the County Link service, which is similar to the Lone Tree Link. But I just want to put a very big highlight on that, because it involves every aspect of station area planning. And as Director Pace mentioned, the station area planning is more or less holistic and organic, and it depends on what the community needs. And when the community and the local area governments have to develop the areas around those station area planning districts and those station areas, it's going to reflect what those communities need. So yes, Douglas County needs more parking. That's because you can't get anywhere in Douglas County without that, because there's what, 2 buses. So I don't want to throw shade. I want to highlight the realities and how we're accounting for it in forward planning, considering all of these things. And so I don't think these are impediments. I think they are opportunities to really look forward and talk to the other elected officials in the community about what they wish to see.
Thank you, Director. Any directors from FRPR that would like to speak? I know we've kind of dominated the conversation and had our fair chance with GM Pace, which we greatly appreciate. But any further comments regarding this topic? I know we do have 3 more topics to keep covering, so. Okay. Excellent. We'll keep moving on. Actually, I'm going to say one thing because I know we haven't, it was shown in the presentation in regards to finding a spot for Douglas County, and I represent Eastern Douglas County. And one of the areas I've heard from my constituents, even though it's outside of my district, is Castle Rock is potentially as an option. So just wanted to throw it out there. Okay, moving on to our next. This is going to be Front Range Passenger Rail District Service Development Plan. I now will offer the floor to Mo Sullivan, who's CDOT's Assistant Director of Passenger Rail. Ms. Sullivan, I give it over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you both boards for inviting me today to speak about the Service Development Plan. So like you said, I'm Mo Sullivan. I'm the Assistant Director of Passenger Rail for the Colorado Department of Transportation. And I'll take the clicker. Yeah, no worries, thanks. And so I oversee the passenger rail unit within CDOT, which is part of the Division of Transit and Rail. And so we are responsible for planning, developing, operating, and integrating rail into the statewide transportation system. So that includes planning and project development, implementation, and of course, collaboration is essential in everything that we do, and are always kind of analyzing and finding innovative ways to, deliver rail service to the state. So kind of an overview and brief history of the Service Development Plan. So CDOT was awarded a federal CRISI grant in 2020 to do the service development planning work. So that was in 2020, but the district itself wasn't created until 2021. So I think it's important to kind of point out that timeline and how long this work has been going on for the service development plan, and also why the district itself is not doing the service development planning efforts or overseeing that, but CDOT is. And then similarly, it was in 2023 that the Front Range Passenger Rail District applied to be part of the Federal Railroad Administration, so FRA's Corridor Identification and Development Program, and was accepted, skipped step 1 and was accepted into step 2, and that was because step 2 is a service development plan, which the state had already started to undertake, and so that's part of the history there. So what exactly is a service development plan? Like I said, it is part of that FRA requirement as part of the CIDP program to kind of is the first kind of major planning phase to advance through the CIDP program, which there's federal dollars available to folks that are part of that program. So a pretty key component, basically a comprehensive planning document to reflect kind of that full build vision of passenger rail along this corridor, and really make the case to FRA that this is a viable project, both kind of in operations and financial feasibility, and also really defines those essential elements that are necessary to deliver that full build vision, and then allows the project to be streamlined through future kind of FRA processes to implement the service. So as I mentioned, there's kind of 3 phases or 3 steps as part of the CIDP program. And so this corridor, Front Range Passenger Rail Corridor, is in step 2. It is one of 7 corridors in the step 2 phase. There is not currently a funded project in step 3. And so we kind of are the front of the pack in terms of advancing into that next step. The next step would be NEPA and preliminary engineering, and so really worth kind of driving home the point that the SDP is a planning document pre-NEPA. So obviously, pretty high level. There's a lot of work that went into kind of the operations analysis, but nothing is kind of set in stone that's outlined in the SDP. And so in terms of plan progress, just kind of want to point out all the different components that are required as part of this FRA process, and kind of our progress so far to date. And so those that are highlighted in green are elements that have been reviewed and approved by FRA. And then those that are highlighted in blue are currently under kind of internal review. Part of that review process is really getting the new district's leadership up to speed and their support up to speed on kind of all of the SDP work as we're submitting to FRA. And then also figuring out what elements of joint service to incorporate in those submissions, recognizing that some of those things are still outstanding and unknown as that negotiation with BNSF is ongoing. And I really wanted to drive home kind of the point around this implementation plan. And so recognizing some of the director's comments earlier tonight, you know, when we did the kind of really technical analysis for the service development plan in terms of phased implementation, because right now, you know, the revenue and ridership numbers are really strongest up north. It made sense to do a lot of the investment up north, but in our collaboration with the Front Range Passenger Rail District Board, we knew that, you know, for them to be successful, we really needed to make sure that development and building towards the south was really prioritized. And so it was in collaboration with the Front Range Passenger Rail District that this phased implementation plan was created, taking into account both kind of that technical analysis, but also kind of the future political and therefore viability of the corridor and service. And so this phased implementation plan does kind of start with those 3 round trips from Denver to Fort Collins. But that next phase is really looking to expand south. And so, for example, our initial kind of technical analysis said, you know, the most bang for your buck, you should only build between Denver and Colorado Springs to start. However, with kind of input from the district board, you know, it was really important that we looked at the whole full south corridor. And so expanding all the way to Pueblo initially so that that service is provided as soon as possible to the full corridor. And so that's part of how the phased implementation was developed. So phase 2 does envision kind of expanding to 4 trips, round trips between Denver and Fort Collins, and then those 2 round trips between Denver and Pueblo. And then continuing to build on that service over time with kind of that final full implementation of the service imagined in 2045. Very high level overview. We do provide regular updates at the FRPR board meetings and even some of the planning committee meetings. So definitely invite you to those as if you want more updates, or certainly happy to do one-on-one in-depth conversations about some of what was presented, and also happy to take some questions tonight.
I'm going to give it to, thank you very much, Ms. Sullivan. Greatly appreciate the presentation. Director Pagliari, you're going to start us off.
Thank you, Chair. This is Director Pagliari. Thank you, Ms. Sullivan. I just have 2 questions. And looking far into the future, it looks like we'll have 6 round trips between Denver and Fort Collins by 2038. Is that what I saw?
Yes.
That's 12 years, 13 years from now. So we'll have 6 round trips. That's not a very useful service, just 6 round trips. But my question, that was my comment, once we build out and we do go to Colorado Springs, and once we want more service than just 6 round trips per day, and I know that might be limited by BNSF right now, we really need to look at dedicated passenger rail track. RTD system is completely dedicated passenger track, and it has to be. But I guess what year do we get dedicated passenger rail track between Denver, Fort Collins, and then Denver and Colorado Springs? And then on top of that, what year do we get ADA accessible level boarding? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Pagliari. Ms. Sullivan?
Yeah, I mean, great question. I think you know, as I stated, this SDP is a pre-NEPA planning document, and so there aren't, you know, it's not set in stone. It provides a pathway towards this level of service. I think for the level of service you're indicating and kind of that dedicated right-of-way, a decision had been made prior to this SDP effort that dedicated right-of-way was too expensive and not something that taxpayers would support at the ballot. And so that's part of why this SDP really looked at using dedicated or the existing freight rail and building from that to optimize a service based on that goal. And, you know, how could we optimize ridership and revenue based on that? But in terms of what's ultimately implemented, you know, I think it really depends on the funding that's available when it comes to time to construct it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director. I'm going to jump around a little bit. Director Labley.
Yeah, Director Labley, I'm also the chair of the Planning Committee, Service Development Plan. Good points. I would also say, though, that we don't own the right-of-way. And so if we wanted to build rail specifically for that, we're going to have to obtain right-of-way, whether it's from BNSF or whomever. And the costs associated with that are tremendous. And so it was really important to us, and Mo did a great job of explaining on the phasing plan. We want to get service to everyone as soon as we can. We've got this initial phase that we think helps us both at the ballot and is potentially the easiest to fund to start. But then when we go to the ballot, we want to make sure we can deliver on the extents from Fort Collins down to Pueblo. That's our top priority. So that's why you saw phase 2 deliver those lesser trips to the south, but make sure we got service to everyone. We went through a lot of discussions to talk about that. And then once we had service to everyone, we want to increase that service incrementally. Now, service development plan is like a North Star. Like, where do we think we're headed? If we get great ridership numbers, that service can increase because we'll renegotiate with BNSF, we'll pay more, we'll expand the service. If at some point we get tremendous service and we start being a thorn in the side of BNSF because they're trying to deliver on their track and so are we, then we'll start talking about adding capacity, both in like maybe some sidings, maybe its own committed rail, but that's a big undertaking. That's a long ways off, and if we let that be what we want to start with, we'll never get there.
Thank you very much, Director. I have Director Banker next in our queue.
Okay, to follow up on that, same thing that Director Pagliari has been talking about, except going north. So it looks like from one of the slides that you had that we would only be getting 10 trips going north up to Fort Collins beginning in 2038. So since you're going forward with a tax increase, is not the tax increase to bring more service and to enhance the rail line and the tracks? And isn't that the point of going for a sales tax increase so that we could get more service at a faster pace? So, that'd be my.
Ms. Sullivan?
Sure, yeah. As you know, the implementation plan was really looking at how to phase service in over time, recognize, you know, and it does have kind of financial considerations as well. And so not knowing kind of the outcome of a ballot measure, it's hard to know how much monies will be available. As I mentioned, it is a pre-NEPA planning document. And so if there's more funding available and there's that desire for, you know, 10 round trips to be built, you know, immediately as opposed to phasing in that service over time, that's certainly a decision that could be made in the future.
Thank you. Director Nicholson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With regard to the, my apologies. Right. Where does this service envision what tracks does this service envision the northern and southern routes using at Union Station to get in? And For the southern route, has there been any exploration of using RTD's tracks, existing track, to get into Union Station more efficiently?
Ms. Sullivan?
Yeah, so great question. For initial phases, just based on the limited kind of frequency, the current configuration of Denver Union Station is envisioned to be enough with some, careful scheduling. However, it's well known that for future phases, something will need to be modified or additional capacity added in or around Denver Union Station to accommodate that full service build out that was presented. And so that is a future study that needs to be done, exactly how to solve for that. But certainly kind of all options are on the table.
Thank you. Director Ruscia?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't mean to beat a dead horse. I just wanted to get clarification. Some of the closed captioning is skipping a little bit, and I'm looking at multiple documents. So as it relates to, it sounds like up to 10 trains, are we talking about from Denver to Fort Collins? Or are we talking about Pueblo to Fort Collins? And is that date earliest feasible as of this moment, 2038? And then I think the follow-up to that is 10 trains right now like the maximum that we're looking at, or are we potentially going to negotiate for greater than 10, not 10 trains, excuse me, 10 trips? 10 trips. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Sullivan?
Yeah, great question. So yes, as part of the full build out and in looking at how to optimize the service to generate the highest ridership and revenue, it is imagined as part of that phased implementation plan that was shown that yes, the 10 round trips would be between Denver and Fort Collins, but that the frequencies, top frequencies on the south would be less. So between Denver and Colorado Springs would be 6 round trips and 4 all the way to Pueblo. Again, that is kind of what the service development plan outlines, and so what's actually implemented could change. And then to your second question, which remind me, sorry, what that was.
Director Ruscia?
Thank you. Is 10 the maximum, or is there potential to negotiate more trips?
Yeah, also a great question, thank you. So for the 10 round trips, that there were pretty extensive operations workshops that were done as part of the service development planning effort. And so that included representation from RTD, Front Range Passenger Rail District, and then the host railroads and FRA. And these were kind of considered, so first there would be over-the-shoulder workshops. So through an NDA, our technical consultant worked with the host railroads to understand what their current operations are and where passenger rail could fit in, and understand what projects, infrastructure upgrades would be needed to accommodate that level of frequency with their operations. And then those outputs were all reviewed in a room with those stakeholders that I mentioned. And so when working through the frequency, 10 was the maximum that was kind of decided at that table between the host railroads, what they would be willing to accommodate on their existing infrastructure. However, again, this is part of a planning process, and so in the future, would they be open to additional frequency? Certainly, that is a possibility, but would have to be worked out with them, and could really depend on their level of business on the corridor and their existing right-of-way.
Thank you. Thank you, Director, for your questions, and thank you, Ms. Sullivan, for your answers. Director Chandler?
Thank you very much. I have a question. I absolutely know that you're going to have to do some significant ADA compliance. All of that should be something that not only the trains themselves, obviously, but also the stations and all of that. We just want to make sure that that is a high priority because I think, obviously, that would be a huge constituency. My question really has to deal with sales tax. Would that be the only revenue stream? Within RTD, we're facing, fluctuations in massive sales tax. So if you're looking at funding all of this through a half-cent sales tax, that seems excessively ambitious and unpredictable. So I don't know if we're facing that within RTD right now. what is your answer? Because we're all competing then for those additional sales tax dollars, and you know, you never know what the economy is going to do. So I don't know how you will deal with that in the future.
Thank you. Ms. Sullivan?
Yeah, so yes, of course, we intend to comply with all ADA regulations as part of the service planning. I can defer to Sal here in a minute in regards to the kind of the ballot plan and the sales tax, but the kind of financial plan as part of the service development planning effort really looks at kind of everything that's on the table. And so you will hear tonight from some of my colleagues that oversee kind of the clean transit enterprise and CTIO funding available from Senate Bill 184. And so some of those funds are dedicated to rail. And so if that dedicated funding is, you know, dedicated towards joint service for a certain number of period of time, but then that service is transitioned over to Front Range Passenger Rail, you know, those monies are no longer being allocated towards joint service. So would it make sense for them to go to Front Range Passenger Rail? I think that's certainly a conversation that could happen in the future.
Excellent. Thank you. GM Pace?
Thanks. In theory, there's federal programs that could help support funding of the service as well. You know, we might have to wait for a new administration for some of those dollars. In addition, we're statutorily allowed to ask for property tax. You know, the research has shown that voters are more supportive of sales tax than property tax. But this is something that, you know, the source of the revenue is something we can explore further. Our enabling legislation also allows for stationary improvement districts with the approval of local government authorities and the voters within a couple miles of the station, with all forms of taxation on the table for those stationary improvement districts. So I think there's we have an idea of what the amount of revenue is that might be needed for different types of service, but determining you know, the exact revenue source is still an iterative process.
Thank you. Director Nicholson, and then we need to move on to our next item.
Yes, thank you. So one of the issues that we've had over the last year that I've been on the board have been passenger strikes and it's not pedestrian strikes. I forget the technical term off the top of my head. Trespasser strikes, thank you, on our right-of-way on the commuter rail lines. Obviously, we're using existing lines here, so there's already some amount of protections on grade crossings. I'm wondering if you know, how many grade crossings are there on the northern route and on the southern route? And are you guys planning on doing any kinds of upgrades to avoid the obviously horrible situations that folks experience on a regular basis, and also to try to, you know, improve reliability? Just curious what your thoughts are on that.
Ms. Sullivan?
Yeah, thank you. Great question. So part of some of the projects that have been identified through the service development planning effort is to eliminate or make those crossings safer. The railroads really, especially when we're talking about passenger rail and their alignment, recognize that there is then a greater risk of drawing passengers towards their alignment, and so really want to mitigate that risk as much as possible, and so are really proactive in trying to find solutions to existing grade crossings, whether that means to kind of build over or under them so that we eliminate that conflict, or find ways to make them safer. And so that is part of what's envisioned as part of the service development plan. So in terms of how many exist currently, I don't have an exact number, and in terms of how many would be eliminated in the future, I think that would be part of what would be decided as, you know, necessary projects as implementation gets closer. But it is a strong priority, both of, you know, in terms of implementing the service and of the host railroads.
Thank you very much. All right, just in the sake of time, we're going to keep on going. I just wanted to say a big thank you to you, Ms. Sullivan, for being available to answer these questions, and greatly appreciate it. Moving forward, we are going to move to our next item, which is going to be our Clean Transit Enterprise funding opportunities. And we do have Craig Seacrest, who's the director of the Clean Transit Enterprise, in attendance. Mr. Seacrest, I'll give it over to you for our next presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So yes, I'm Craig Seacrest. I'm Director of the Clean Transit Enterprise. I do kind of have to apologize. I had kind of an emergency dental surgery at the end of last week, and so I'm still recovering a little bit. So if I'm having trouble articulating, please just let me know. I'm kind of muscling through it a little bit. Hopefully this will be better than root canal. So the bar is low here. Anyhow, let me start off with kind of a high-level discussion about the CTE, and then we'll drill down into the specific programs. The CTE was created with Senate Bill 21260, so back in 2021, and it created kind of a small program which created the CTE as an enterprise and then provided a funding source with the retail delivery fee. And the focus of that program was to provide support for the electrification of the transit vehicles around the state. So providing grants for EV transition or fleet transition planning, for facilities, for charging infrastructure, and for vehicle replacement. And that's what the CTE has been doing for the last couple years. I said we're now a few years into it. There's a stable funding stream, and we've kind of been off to the races. So then last year, or 2 years ago in 2024, the Senate, the legislature passed Senate Bill 24230, and that created the oil and gas production fee and really kind of build on those current, sort of purpose or mission of the CTE. And basically we expanded that business service to include 3 additional programs. And I'll talk those about in a second. But basically it provided some real resources for CTE and the state to provide support for transit and rail. So we don't typically talk that much about the overall funding, so this was a new slide, but generally what you see here is that we started off with this funding of about $9 or $12 million a year coming from the retail delivery fee. Now as we get to FY26, we get sort of a partial funding from the oil and gas fee. That's going to take our total funding for the year up to, I think, around $65, $70 million. And then in FY27, we get to full funding of oil and gas fee. Our funding will go up, total funding will go up to about $120 million. And then, particularly the oil and gas funding is tied to the price of oil and gas. But based on our current projections, we think that the revenues continue to grow, and that in FY28 and beyond, we're looking at a total program level of about $150 million per year. So let me talk a little bit about the specific programs. First, the program that we call the Transit ZEV program. This is what's funded with the retail delivery fee. We've done a couple rounds of grants for that, where I think we've done 2 rounds of planning grants, 1 round of capital grants, and we actually just closed another round of capital grants. So far we've awarded about $15.5 million. There's 19 projects, and I said the project is up and running. Going forward, and I think part of what you wanted me to talk about was opportunities for funding opportunities for RTD and FRPR. Going forward, we think we're going to probably continue to do about $15 to $25 million a year of grants to support those various EV categories that I talked about. In terms of RTD, RTD has been and continues to be eligible for grants. Up until Friday, we hadn't received any applications, but I was pleased to see, I think, an application for a charging or EV-related facility for about $2.5 million. I think we got a total of about $35 million of requests. But again, there's definitely going to be continual opportunity for RTD to go ahead and pursue those grants, whether it's to do additional fleet transition planning or to support initiatives related to EV facilities, charging infrastructure, or vehicle replacement. For FRPR, we're probably, right now I don't think there's really opportunities for them, but there could be down in the future. That could extend to if you're getting into electric train sets or some type of zero-emission train sets. And then, I don't know what type of, connectors or other support transit you might run, but if so, there's opportunities there. So I don't want to say there's massive opportunities right now, but perhaps down the road. And again, the funding there is generally the retail delivery fee is pretty stable and predictable. It's been growing at somewhere between 10% and 15% a year, and we expect it to continue to do so. Okay, so let's move on to the SB 223 programs. So first of all, in terms of funding, because of Prop 117, which limits an enterprise to $100 million in its first 5 years, the CTE is going to be limited in what we can bring in for the for the oil and gas fee this year. And so there's a little bit of a trade-off between what comes in the retail delivery fee, but our estimates are that we're going to be able to bring in about $55 million this year. In FY27, that's going to grow to about $107 million. We had thought it was going to be a bit high, maybe somewhere closer to $115 million, but the Moody's and the Energy Information Agency is now projecting that the price of oil per barrel is going to drop, and said our funding levels are tied to the price of oil and gas. So yeah, we're thinking that for FY27, it might be more in the $107, $108 million range. But then when we're looking at the forecasts in FY28 and beyond, we actually expect it to go up quite a bit, and that could grow up to as much as $140 million a year. Again, because of it's tied to oil and gas, there's a lot of potential volatility there. So in terms of the programs, so there's 3 programs that were created as part of SB 230. And I want to highlight that they're very different and have very different processes and requirements. And so I think there's a tendency for people maybe to get them confused. I'm going to try and kind of sort those out a bit. So first of all, the big program, which is 70% of the resources, is the Transit Formula Grants Program, or what we've just been calling the SB 230 program. And that's really meant to be support for transit agencies around the state to increase transit services. The second program is the Rail Funding Program. That's the one that has a lot to do with supporting the Front Range Passenger Rail, as well as other passenger rail initiatives throughout the state. That's 20% of the funding. And then third, there's a competitive or discretionary program that's really intended to support the creation of regional transportation authorities or to provide support for multimodal facilities. And again, that's 10% of the funding. But again, they're very separate programs. They have their own pots of money, and it's quite different in nature. So in terms of funding, I mentioned that we expect $55 million this year. It's going to grow to, we think, about $107 million in FY27, and then potentially higher or beyond. I think I've seen some other numbers floating around, like $90 million for the program. So I would prefer if we use these sort of numbers that we've been putting out. These are our latest official estimates. So let me kind of walk through the three programs. So the formula program is really targeted to build on that existing business purpose for the CTE and to provide a sustainable and predictable funding source to enable increased transit services. And I think it's important to recognize that we're not necessarily looking for agencies to come out and expand their transit every year. It's kind of largely a one-time boost where we kind of expect the agencies to, first use the money to expand their transit, and that might include buying vehicles to have the capabilities to do it, but then to use the money to maintain it on sustain it for over, in perpetuity. So as part of the coming up with a program, the legislation required that we come up with an allocation method and a formula. And I have to admit, while I love the bill, and I don't want to disparage SB 230 in any way, it created a very complex allocation approach, in part because of the eligibility. Just about every transit agency in the state is eligible to participate. So you got to come up with a formula that goes from a very small rural transit agency that's perhaps providing a few thousand passenger trips a year to a mega agency like RTD, and in between that you've got rural agencies, rural resort agencies, small cities, and then even nonprofits are in there. So a very mixed bag of agencies to try and put into one formula. Secondly, they prescribe that we use 6 factors in this formula. And 6 factors is a lot of considerations to put into a formula. I think I've heard it described as a population-based formula. I don't think that's accurate. It's really a multi-factor based formula, and population is part of that. But it also considers some transit system facts considerations such as ridership and ridership and vehicle revenue miles. But then there's also some softer considerations such as population density, local zoning, and disproportionately impacted communities. So when you put that together, it makes for a very complex formula to try and run. So in terms of eligible activities, there are again a few bit of requirements in the legislation. One of the primary considerations is that the funding needs to get used to new service. I think the legislative intent there was not to have CTE money replace existing local funding for current services. It's meant to be additive. So that's been an important factor for us as we go out and try and award grants for the program. Secondly, agencies have to have an existing service. And that's been a little bit challenging. So we have a few agencies that have just started up and trying to figure out how do you put them into a formula. But generally, we're not looking for CTE to be a source for creating new agencies. We're trying to work with existing agencies and build on the services they already provide. Trying to remember what else I had here. In terms of the use of the funds, so again, the legislation provides, I think, a little bit of confusion because it says the money is for eligible operating activities, but then it goes on to define eligible operating activities as anything it takes to add new service. And so we looked at this pretty closely, and I think one of the feelings was that for a lot of agencies, it really was, and particularly some of the smaller rural agencies, it simply wasn't viable for them to add new service without buying vehicles. And we felt there was a pretty close relationship between buying vehicles and adding that new service. So me being me, and then the board, the CTE board, provided direction that all of your typical operating expenses are eligible under the program, but also new vehicles as a capital expense are okay. And then lastly, there's a requirement in the bill that just for this one program, the formula program, the funds have to be spent within 2 years. So within 2 years of a grant contract. And we recognize that that can create some challenges, particularly if you're getting into some of the capital expenditures or bus purchases. So let me talk a little bit about the funding. As I mentioned, there's $55 million this year we're going to raise in total for the CTE. That equates to about $38 million for the program. And again, we're trying to be, we ended up looking at using $37 million to be conservative. In FY27, we expect that number to grow up to somewhere around $75 million. And depending on what happens in FY28, the program could be somewhere around $90 or $100 million a year. For FY26, we're trying to stand up this program in a hurry. And as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of challenges in figuring out how do you put together this very complex formula. And what we ended up deciding to do was to create sub-allocations within the program. So rather than having all these agencies that are very disparate compete within one big pool, which really doesn't work very well, instead, we created 3 sub-programs, and those categories were the mega agencies, which is essentially RTD, large transit agencies, and then small transit agencies. And for small transit agencies, we drew a line, I think, at about 50,000 annual ridership. But then me being my recommendation and the board's approval, essentially developed a formula where we set those sub-programs and then allocated them. And for FY26, because of the reduced funding level and the complexity, so we came to the decision that we would allocate 25% of the funding to RTD, and then that drove how much money was available to get allocated across the other large agencies. For FY20, and the formula that we approved has only been approved since, for FY26. The board's going to have to approve another formula for FY27, and it'll probably be an annual decision. But in that, with the increased funding, the expectation is that RTD will get quite a larger share, and so we expect that could be somewhere in the 50 to 60% range. And then, in FY '28 and beyond, I really don't want to, commit to where we're going, but presumably it's somewhere in the same range. Right now, FRPR, sorry, I don't think they're really eligible right now. Perhaps down the road, it becomes, well. So anyhow, I'm sure there'll be a few more questions on this. Let me kind of move on here for the sake of time. So secondly, the passenger rail program. And the purpose of the program is to fund passenger rail projects and services. And again, we're always trying to tie things back to this purpose of the enterprise, which is ultimately to do things that are going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The funds are intended to be, sort of the state's contribution or match to local efforts to implement passenger rail efforts. So I don't think there's sufficient funding, nor is there intent for the passenger rail program to fund everything. But it's there meant to help and provide a state contribution. And again, the two initiatives that are really identified in the legislation as being the focus of the program is one is the Northwest Corridor, and the second is completion of the N line. So in terms of funding, I said we're in this sort of junior year in FY '26. We think the program funding is going to be about $11 million. In FY '27, we estimate about $21 million. And then beyond that, depending on what happens to the price of the oil and gas, it could be in the $25 to $30 million a year range. Of that money, half of it, or half the funding is really we're committed to providing that to the Northwest Corridor Joint Service. And the CTE board has already passed a resolution making that sort of loose commitment. The next step is once there's a finance plan to come back and make a harder commitment. The remaining half is really kind of sitting in what we would call a lockbox, and it's intended to be used for N line completion. And so right now we're just kind of in a waiting pattern to see what RTD and the other interests want to do with that. But we're not, and it's not going towards Mountain Rail. There's been no discussion of doing that. They said we're really intending to have that be a way to help fund that completion of the N line. Lastly is the discretionary program, and I have to admit, with all the focus on trying both between working in joint service and trying to get the formula program up, we haven't really done a ton of work on this program. I mentioned that the purpose of it is to either provide incentives for the creation of regional transportation authorities, RTD already is one, but also to provide support for multimodal facilities. One of the reasons we haven't been in a huge hurry to do it is it's a bit of a small program this year at about $5.5 million. But going forward in FY '27 and beyond, we expect it to grow to about $11 million. We do think it provides both an opportunity for RTD and probably much more likely for Front Range Passenger Rail. For RTD, any type of multimodal projects, when we put out a note for the program, I think that where they have multimodal projects, it's a potential source of funding. It says RTD is certainly an eligible candidate. It could also be a potential use of funding as we get into Burnham Yard expansion and have to make improvements associated with Front Range Passenger Rail. We think there might be some uses there. And then again, as we get into Front Range Passenger Rail, multimodal facilities and train stations and things like that could be an eligible source. So I think I've got through that as fast as I can. Why don't I stop there and take comments?
Thank you very much for the presentation, Mr. Sechrist. I'm going to call on Director Larson first.
Hi, I'm really confused about what happened for '26 with the formula part of I think the SB 230. I actually got a question from one of your board members as to why we didn't apply for more money, for that program, because clearly we should deserve around 50–60% based on this formula. And after a lot of confusing sort of investigating, it just seems to turn out that whatever formula you guys used, and I haven't seen it published anywhere, and I'm kind of confused about that too. It ended up that we only got 25% of that, which seems to be not kind of what should be our fair share. And certainly we could use the money next year. You know, we're kind of in a budget crunch. And I don't understand this whole thing about how the formula is going to change every year. You know, it would be very helpful, I would think, to have a set formula that would give us a predictable amount of money based on what's expected to be raised every year, rather than just kind of telling us, yeah, we're just going to, you know, twist it, you know, change it around every year, and it could be anything. Who knows? I mean, that seems kind of, you know, that just seems weird to me. And then I also don't understand how new service is defined or supposed to be defined with this legislation. I mean, you know, if we're in, God forbid, a service cutting mode, and then anything could be potentially defined as new service if it's service that, you know, we otherwise wouldn't have had, or can it? It's just really confusing to me. But mostly I'm just especially concerned with this perception that I have that we've kind of gotten shortchanged in 26.
Thank you for the question. I think, first of all, there needs to be some clarity on expectations. I understand, I realize that there's been expectations out there that, you know, RTD should get 50 or 60% of the funding based on the formula. That's simply not true. As I said, when you looked at those factors, 3 of the factors, population, ridership, and vehicle revenue miles, heavily favor RTD. You know, they roughly would be about 60% of the funding would go to RTD if you just looked at those considerations. However, when you look at the other factors that are in there, population density, disproportionately impacted communities, and local zoning, well, those level the playing field across all those agencies. RTD does not rank highest on disproportionately impacted communities. In fact, it's about the middle of the pack. So when you get into the mechanics of a formula, which is, you know, what it's asked to do, it actually greatly reduces the amount of funding. So, you know, I think there's an expectation if you just put RTD in the funding, they get 50, 60%. It's not.
Could I ask though, I mean, to me a formula is like there's numbers and then there's sort of coefficients. Like, you know, you're going to weight each of these factors. You're going to have a way to measure each of these factors. I don't know how you measure local zoning exactly, how you quantify that, but I guess you kind of have to figure out a way. And what I don't I mean, I haven't seen that formula anywhere, what you've used for this. And it seems to me that you should have a published public formula that people can comment on and that we can use for planning purposes. And while I understand that maybe some of these other factors, RTD doesn't, you know, isn't, you know, the highest, I guess, on it, it still seems that it's hard to tell. Depends what coefficient and how you weight each of these factors. And it certainly with at least 3 and, you know, probably 5, we probably are the biggest, for sure. We're certainly one of the densely zoned communities in the state. And I mean, I just don't understand what the thought process was here, that we'll just break these into, you know, we'll break it into 3 different types of communities. It doesn't seem to relate to any formula. And when will that formula be published so that we can understand what we're supposed to be getting, or what whoever thinks? I guess, is it you or is it the CTE? I mean, why can't that be published so we can understand how it's working?
Mr. Sechrist?
I'm sure. I'll recognize that, you know, we could do a better job in the transparency of the formula. You know, I think based on hearing this and some things I've been hearing in the last month or two, I think what I'd really like to do is just to hold a public forum where I can actually really walk through the nuts and bolts of the formula, and to get the methodology out there. So I'll granted.
Will that remain consistent, though? I mean, because you said it was going to change every year, and what good I mean, that's not that helpful to just have one year it be one way, and then we'll just change it every year to kind of you could change it every year and change those coefficients and just be handing it out to whoever buys you the nicest dinners. I mean, I'm not, based on how you do that, and that doesn't seem to be a very good planning process to me.
Well, I would, I would first say is, we're in the first year of the program. I think it would be a great mistake to say we're going to put the model, a formula in place this year and keep it in perpetuity. We know we're in a learning process. So at a minimum, I think getting through this first year, seeing how it works, and then revisiting it and seeing we have to make tweaks to it makes a lot of sense. In particular, one of the factors that's an unknown has been a challenge is we don't know what agencies are even going to participate. I had to evaluate and come up with some estimate of who was going to be in the formula to build it. I looked at about 55 agencies that we thought were going to apply or could potentially apply. We ended up, I think, with about 38 or 40. So if nothing else, just going forward, knowing now what's the more likely universe of agencies to participate, it will help us drill down. So I think in reality this is our first year. It's a learning year. In FY27, I think we'll probably make revisions based on what we found. And then I think beyond that, we can probably get to a much more static formula. But secondly, I think, the math is the math. And the reality is when you put in these other factors, RTD does not do nearly as well as you think they would. I ran the formula with RTD in it with all the other agencies for FY26, and they're really only getting like 27% of the funding. I just got new numbers from the National Transit Database that we're going to use for running FY27. And based on that, RTD would probably only get about 40%. So I think I would argue that the formula works well if you're competing against like agencies. So if you're competing transport against Mountain Metro, against Pueblo, there are similar agencies, it works. But when you have an RTD with 60 million riderships and another agency with 3,000, it's hard to have a formula that treats that well. I will say, to me, really, the best outcome for RTD is most likely to actually have this sub-allocation. I think RTD will do better than being in a formula. I think we all recognize that. So really what I think you need to as part of this process, in trying to translate what was in the legislation into something that works, it requires a policy level decision to decide on this allocation between the three tiers, and then a formula to decide how the money within those two tiers gets allocated.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the questions, Director Larson, Mr. Seacrest, for the answers. I'm going to keep us moving along. Director Stockinger.
Yeah, thanks. Just a couple of thoughts. First, and I know the director said it somewhat facetiously, but for the record, no one is buying a CDOT employee's dinner to change their formulas for them. That doesn't happen and wouldn't happen. But again, taking a step back, Craig has been with us for about a year. Mo has been with us for under a year. CDOT is in a position now where we're staffing up our rail team, as Mo's the example. Our enterprises, like the Clean Transit Enterprise that was focused on electric transit vehicles, has now greatly expanded its focus. In a minute, you're about to hear from Piper Darlington, who runs our CTIO, and they went from an organization that was building our express lanes to now a mission that's greatly expanding rail transportation and funding. It wasn't that long ago that CDOT was kind of wringing our hands trying to figure out whether we could or should give Sal and the Southwest Chief Commission $1 million match to help the Southwest Chief with a federal Tiger grant. And now we're, between our enterprises and CDOT, we have hundreds of millions of dollars to contribute towards things like joint service and Northwest Rail. So it's a good transition, and I hope we just recognize that, because I'm pretty excited about it. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Director. Any other hands that I saw from FRPR? Okay. Director Chandler, I'll give you 30 seconds and I got us move us on, okay?
Okay, my question has to do with the suit that's against SB 230. How is that going to affect? I mean, to me, that's huge and it's going to affect a ton. And so where does that stand? I know it was just filed, so I'll just leave it there.
Thank you very much. And then just for the sake of the record, Director Guzman has joined us. Director, just real quick, when were you elected and what areas do you represent?
Hi, apologies for arriving late. I was with a community meeting at the same time, unfortunately scheduled. So I am Michael Guzman. I represent Denver's north and west corner of the city, including Union Station, where all of your lovely trains travel to and from every day. And in my district, we house all of the commuter and light rail facilities except for the Evans facility, the Yale facility down south in my neighbor's district. I was elected in 2023, and this is my third year on the board, so next year will be my last year here as we go into the election cycle. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And I know there are hands up from my directors. We're going to hold these questions. We're going to give our presentation from Ms. Piper Darlington, the director of the Colorado Transportation Investment Office. I'm going to give the floor over to you, Mr. Seacrest. Thank you very much for your presentation. And for those with their hands up or waiting, we'll have an opportunity after this presentation. I just need to keep us moving in sake of time. Thank you. And Ms. Darlington, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I only have 3 slides, so we'll get to the questions. If you could cue to the next one. Oh, I do. It's me. Okay, thank you. So yeah, wanted to provide a little information from the Colorado Transportation Investment Office point of view. Obviously, there was a lot in SB 184, but for CTIO specifically, you know, as Herman mentioned, we have been an enterprise at CDOT for over 10 years and very focused on, you know, aggressively pursuing innovative finance to help deliver large infrastructure projects. So this was, you know, reinforce really that the scope of our powers and duties were to prioritize reducing traffic congestion. You know, we have been doing that really through express lanes, but this more explicitly directed us to do that through a full slate of multimodal transportation projects. And in order to do that, it directed us to collect a new fee, to implement and collect a new fee, which is administered on rental car vehicles. So this is a $3 a day fee. We just began collecting this in January, so almost a full year of collections of this new rental car fee, which is the congestion impact fee in the legislation. To clarify again, this rental car fee revenue is being collected by DOR, and it is coming into CTIO, and this is really intended to be our contribution towards not just joint service, but also Mountain Rail was mentioned earlier, and Bustang is also mentioned in the legislation as sort of eligible uses and eligible projects. So the sort of working assumption, and you can see on the slide, is that 50% of this congestion impact fee is going to go towards support joint service. CTIO is a party to the IGA along with RTD, Front Range Passenger Rail. We're part of the Joint Executive Oversight Committee. So the intention right now, working assumption, obviously there's a lot of unknowns, as Deborah and GM Sal Pace mentioned, a lot of negotiations with BNSF and our railroad partners. So, but the working assumption is that 50% of that fee is going to go to support joint service, 40% is going to help support Mountain Rail, which we haven't touched on a little bit, but essentially this is sort of a more of an in-house project, if you will, sort of the CDOT family, Division of Transit and Rail, so Mo's team, CDOT, and CTIO are really working to expand on the success we've seen with the Winter Park Express. So I've got a few stats on the next slide about that. And then really 10% could possibly go towards Bustang if we can kind of understand the cost of those first 2 projects. So those are sort of our working assumptions right now of how the fee will be used. This is, you wanted me to touch a little bit on sort of funding. So this is the current forecast for the congestion impact fee. CDOT, the CDOT revenue team helps us forecast this fee on an annual basis. CDOT already collects has a long history of collecting other fees on rental car vehicles under the FASTER legislation, if some of you remember that. So this is our current forecast. Again, FY25, we only had half a year because we started in January. So the fiscal year again, January through the end of June, and we are into FY26 there. You can see we are estimating that we're going to collect just shy of $60 million for this fiscal year, so that's roughly $57 million. And this is our current forecast through fiscal year 35. So CDOT generally updates its revenue forecasts going into the draft budget cycle, and then again probably in January. But this is sort of our current latest and greatest forecast for that congestion impact fee. And then I touched on some of these a little bit already, but again, SB 184 really just reiterates our legislative authority to fund a full suite of multimodal projects, not just express lanes, and that CTIO is really directed to help reduce congestion on public highways. So again, I highlighted a few projects. This group is very familiar with joint service, so I won't touch on that, but again, Mountain Rail is really working to deliver a round trip from Denver to Granby and eventually with service up to Steamboat Springs, Craig, and Hayden as those communities are transitioning away from coal. There's existing rail infrastructure that we can really take advantage of there to help reduce congestion on I-70, especially in the wintertime, to offer a great ride for visitors to the state who want to go skiing either at Winter Park Resort or up in Steamboat. So we are really focused on getting one round trip going by November of 2026. So Division of Transit and Rail and CTIO are working very closely on Mountain Rail. And then I mentioned earlier, we've really been looking for opportunities to benefit the fee payer immediately since we're already collecting this fee. So one of the ways that we have been doing that is through a partnership with Winter Park. Last year was our first year of implementing this partnership, and we were able to reduce ticket fares by almost half. I think in some days it was $9. Mo, correct me if I'm wrong there. But we greatly reduced ticket fares. We increased ridership on some days by over 150%. We were seeing on heavy traffic days like Saturday and Sunday, around 95% load factors between seats filled on the train. So this was a really successful partnership, and we were able to direct some of the congestion impact fee to that partnership last year. We are going to have that partnership again this year, and really this is to help us get people excited about that route, riding that route on a more regular basis to help us set Mountain Rail up for success. So that's been a short-term win for us and a way for us to direct some of that congestion impact fee and kind of immediately benefit the fee payers. And then I mentioned busting, again, the legislation, the law enumerates that, but right now we're really focused on the two rail initiatives and seeing sort of where we land in terms of cost and is that 10% going to come to fruition for transit. So still in early stages, I think, as everyone has kind of said, on some of the costs around these projects. So those were my slides. So I'm happy to answer questions, Chair Bouquet, from either board.
No, I appreciate it very much, Ms. Darlington, for the presentation. Director Ruscia, I see your hand.
Thank you. I had my hand up previously regarding Senate Bill 230 formula. Can I ask that now, or do I need to wait?
Why don't we wait for other matters on that?
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Darlington's presentation? Okay, well, greatly. Yeah, Director Guzman.
So sorry, I want to make sure I understand this clearly. The only relevance that this has then for RTD is the joint service. The other matters strictly CDOT and state.
Yes, correct. Yep. So we're a party to the IGA and working with Deborah and FRPR as part of the Joint Executive Oversight Committee. So this funding stream would be a significant source of funding towards the advancement of joint service.
Okay, and it's through the legislation only eligible for the Front Range passenger rail usage. Unlike the previous funds that we talked about, this will only go for that.
Those are the two, it is very clearly identified in legislation that we are directed to help support joint service. So yes, it's very clear that it is eligible, and we've been directed to, it's called out specifically. So yes, there's no ambiguity there.
Great. So for us, then, there should be no issue in why we haven't gone after any amount of this money at this point, because it doesn't really do much for us without having a joint service agreement plan in place, correct?
Yeah, and it's set up a little bit different from CTE where they have a grants program. This is really a CTIO managed funding source, and we will sort of be a funding partner to the service. So yeah, there's not really, it's a different mechanism in how those funds are going to flow or support RTD. So we're sort of more of a funding partner, but there's no grant mechanism as there is sort of with CTE. Is that helpful?
Yeah, no, thank you for the
Okay.
clarification. That's
Yeah.
exactly what I was hoping to hear. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further questions regarding this topic? Yes, Director Mulvey.
Hi, good morning, Ms. Darlington. It's actually not morning anymore, is it? I'm looking ahead. I'm looking ahead.
That's okay.
You mentioned that the statute directly calls out joint service. Does it specify Front Range passenger rail entire line or joint service as a priority among the entire line? Do
Ms.
we know?
Darlington?
I'd have to go back and look, but I will say the IGA that we're all a party to, right, clearly directs us all to pursue joint service as sort of an initial phase, you know, to help FRPR be successful in its ultimate vision. So I would say I think that the IGA is very clear on sort of what our role is in joint service itself, is to set you all up for success at the ballot and sort of for the future vision. But I think it's really only contemplated that CTIO is contributing congestion impact fee dollars to this kind of initial first phase.
No, thank you, and we appreciate the partnership.
Thank you, the question.
Thank you very much, Director Mulvey. Any further questions on this topic? Well, perfect. Well, thank you very much, Ms. Darlington, for your
Thank you for having me.
presentation. I'm going to try to wrap us up prior to 7, so that's going to be moving to our other matters. Director Arusha, I did promise you opportunity to ask your questions here. And then if there are any further questions, I would recommend potentially via email to be sending these up to keep us moving forward. So Director Arusha.
Thank you, sir. So again, this is related to the previous presentation. I just want to note, you know, RTD is the state's largest transit provider. We are the heavy hitter. We're the only heavy hitter. And that we're only expected to receive about 25% of the 2030 formula is concerning. But to Director Larson's point, like, I think it would really be beneficial for us to understand the full formula decision making that went into that and some of those metrics and coefficients as it was noted. The information that I have is from July. Maybe there is additional information that wasn't published or is published and I just wasn't noted online. But, you know, I think this is an essential part of the conversation, given that FRPR and state entities are asking RTD to contribute tens of millions of dollars towards joint service upfront, as well as ongoing O&M costs in perpetuity. And the reason why I say this is because when that bill was moving through the legislature, one of the sticking points for this board or the previous board to remain neutral was the promise of significant local transportation funding. Like that bill laid out 70% for local transit, you know, 10% for specific competitive grants, and then 15% for rail projects, with a priority for 2 segments of unbuilt fast tracks. And so, I mean, just given those statutory allocations and what the community, the public, legislators, and the board was sold during the time that bill was being passed, you know, again, I want to back up my colleague, Director Larson, in stressing for that transparency. I'm trying to figure out a soft landing for my comments, and I guess I don't have them. I said what I said. With that, though, I do appreciate the conversation and the dialogue, and I hope this dialogue continues with a renewed commitment towards transparency on all sides, and getting those follow-up meetings and questions answered when needed, just to ensure that together and jointly we can provide excellent transit to the communities that we serve. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Arusha. All right, any other matters? Okay. I'm just going to say, going forward, Chair Nevitt, I think we'll work closely together. Obviously, it was very much the conversation on this side of the table, which just shows the amount of interest and potential enthusiasm when it comes down to a project like this. So we greatly appreciate all of you being present, being here to answer those questions, and going forward and sake of time and trying to save us a little time tonight. I think it would be appropriate to figure out, Chair Nevitt, on your guys' side, for a future meeting with both our boards, what are going to be some discussion topics? And I think for us at RTD, we need to have the conversation of what are those steps forward that we want to have in regards to a joint conversation. So just wanted to greatly appreciate you guys all for your time. Chair Nevitt, I'll give it over to you for closing remarks, and then I'll wrap us up.
Thank you very much for hosting us and for helping coordinate this together. I think this was a great start. I think we've got a lot of business together, not just with joint service, but going into the future as well. There's a lot of overlap between what we're doing and what you're doing. And as I said at the beginning, our constituents are your constituents, our riders are your riders. So looking forward to doing this again.
Very well put, Chair. And again, I just wanted to thank all the presenters who are present for your presentations. It was greatly informative to all of us. Would like to thank all our staff members who helped organize this ultimately. Thank GMCO Johnson for being present. Thank GM Pace for being present. And of course, thank you all for coming into our boardroom and getting the opportunity for us to dialogue. This is very important going forward for all of us. And I'm really excited about the future of our partnership. So with that being said, any other matters? Okay, we are going to be adjourned as of 6:58.